Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Saga of Avatar Korra in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Book 1, Healing. Chapter 16, Broken Chains. Master Tenzin, Bolin shouted as he ran back up the hill. He seized the door of the pagoda and pulled. The door refused to budge, and with a wrench he slammed back against it. Locked. Bolin stumbled to his feet and rattled the door again. Nothing. He glanced around and took a few steps back. Master Tenzin, he called. A window opened on the floor above and an eye peered at him. Bolin. A voice asked, and Jinora raised her head, soon flanked by her mother and sister. Hi, Bolin said with a smile. You guys okay? He yelled. Pema winced. We can hear you just fine. You're not that far away. Sorry, he said, lowering his voice. Dad's just gone down to let you in, Jinora called as the door beside Bolin rattled. Tenzin looked around with suspicion as he held the door open and locked it as soon as Bolin was inside. Have they found her? Bolin asked. Tenzin shook his head. Not yet. We're still waiting on some word from Chief Bafong. Bolin clenched and unclenched his hands at his side. Korra. She'll be all right, right? I mean, she's the Avatar? Isn't she, Master Tenzin? Please, just call me Tenzin. And yes. I have never been in doubt it was Korra all these years. He glanced back out of the pagoda after a pause. Where are your friends? My dash? Oh, you mean my brother and Asami? Asked Bolin. They're keeping an eye on those thugs, we caught them before they got away. But yeah, they're guarding them while I checked how things were here. Things. They seem to be okay. So, maybe we should go help them. Tenzin nodded. We should at least get them back here where it's safe. Not sure how much if we will get anything out of Manu or she. The Red Lotus of old were not easy to interrogate. The ones who confessed never had anything useful to tell us either, and their leader. Tenzin sighed as he trailed off. Their leader. Bolin prompted. Sorry. Tenzin looked serious. He escaped us. But not in the way you're thinking, he left his body. Bolin blinked. Okay, I should just admit right now, I have no idea what that means. Tenzin offered a grim smile. Possibly not far removed from what you might already think. He was able to send his consciousness away from his body. Oh. Bolin looked around. Oh, what if he comes back and possesses someone? He span around, keeping an eye out for the encroaching vision of the Red Lotus's leader. What are you doing? Tenzin asked. There was this great radio play about these spirit exterminators in Republic City and Dash. Bolin, this is somewhat different, Tenzin said in a stern voice. There is no way for his mind to take over another body. In releasing his spirit as he did, he ensured he would be trapped in the spirit world. Oh. Well, I suppose that's good, Bolin said, still not completely comfortable, turning his back on the shadows in the corners of the room. He scratched his head. Okay, so, we have Naga, who I'm pretty sure could track Korra. All we need to do is get back to the mainland. Would that it were that simple. Tenzin sank into a nearby chair. The Red Lotus are exceptional benders back in the day, and I doubt our current opponents are anything less. Tenzin looked up. Have they demonstrated their abilities at all? Bolin winced. Yeah. They took us out before we had a chance. Tenzin frowned. You're fortunate to still be alive. His eyes widened. Oh, I wonder. You three were close to Korra, weren't you? Bolin nodded. It's not impossible the Red Lotus might try to use you against Korra at some point. We will need to ensure you three are safe too. He held up a hand as Bolin started to protest. Don't worry. I'm not advocating you sit by while the search is made. Then what do we do? Bolin asked. If we can be used against her, shouldn't we stay out of the way? He hopped from one foot to the other. But I want to help. Korra's my friend. He stopped and blinked. Tenzin sighed. Were this another opponent, another situation, I might concur. But we have very little idea of who we can trust or how deep the betrayal reaches. Bolin, I'm afraid your brother and Miss Sato are some of the only people we can possibly trust. Tenzin sighed. Though I can think of a few others. As much as it pains me, I am going to have to involve my brother. He dialed a number on the phone. The one advantage of your siblings going into the armed forces. Hello? Hello? Yes. Yes. No. Look, can I speak to Commander Bumi? Commander Bumi. What do you mean he's on leave? How can he be on leave with his troops? You know what, never mind. Did he take his radio with him? What mountain range? Look, this is important. I need you to send someone to tell him I am ringing. Ma'am, I am his brother. Yes, that one. Yes, yes. I know. Would you please? Thank you. If he protests, tell him it's about Lagama's cave. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Radio problems? Bolin asked. Tenzin nodded. You know, Asami is really good with technology and stuff. Maybe she could give them some help. If she's handy with a radio, we have one here. It'll be quicker to just try direct. Tenzin started saying. Bolin turned on his heel and rushed out, remembering a moment later the door should remain locked. He span around, slammed the door closed and sprinted along the path to the beach. Did Aang's friends have to run around this much? Probably not, they could just fly around on Appa. Could Korra have an air bison too? It would be so handy. Ah, but then what would happen to Naga? Bolin doubted Korra would just abandon the polar bear dog. The short run was nothing, he had been fit before, but the pro-bending training had done wonders for his health. He was not even out of breath as he arrived at the beach. He hesitated just as he was about to call out, something had happened. Mako was fiddling with one of the boats and Asami was sat on a rock staring out across the bay. Neither said a word. Manu and she were still unconscious. Bolin frowned. Manu was flat on his back on the sand, soaked to the skin with one sleeve missing. Did something happen? He asked. Mako glanced around frustrated. I thought you were going to inform Master Tenzin. His tone was sharp. Bolin frowned, Mako's cheek looked reddened on one side. Had someone caught him in the scuffle with the Red Lotus? I did, he said after a moment. And he knows. And he's fine incidentally. He flashed a smile to Asami who did not even look at him. He's trying to get hold of his brother, but there's some mountains in the way and I thought Asami has to know something about radios, so I came to get you and see if you need help. And where are you going, Mako? Bolin asked. Mako ignored him and continued doing something with the boat. Bolin. Asami's voice was tight. I'll see what I can do. She looked away from Mako and walked stiffly back towards the pagoda. Okay Mako, what gives? I've been gone for 5 minutes and you two are acting like you're worst enemies or something. Mako paused. It's not like that, Bolin. We're just concerned. Yeah, he muttered. Concerned. We were going to come back, but I reckoned we needed to get moving faster. What? Why? Bolin asked. Korra's parents are still alive. Mako stood up, staring across the bay. What? How? Oh. Right. Yeah. Mako clenched his jaw as he shoved a plank of wood off the boat. And right now they're on their way here at the Red Lotus's invitation. They're their last trump card. Then we just have to get to them first. Bolin grinned. Wow though, Master Tenzin was pretty certain you'd never get anything out of them. Mako smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Must have worried him with this, he said as he snapped a flame dagger into existence. So that's it, Bolin said, relaxing. You played up being all serious and dangerous and got Asami worried again, didn't you? Oh, man, she really didn't like that thing before, did she? Yeah, Mako said as the flame dagger vanished. Something like that, he muttered. If you like I can talk to her. Explain it's just a thing you have to do fast, and that you never mean anything by it. Don't worry about it, Mako said, ducking his head away. So, Bolin said, wondering if Mako's crush on Asami had run into a few problems. Just as well, at least according to Dr. Love. Where do we need to go? We are going nowhere. I am going to Bato Port. I'm going to head over there, see if I can warn Korra's mom and dad. If I go now, I might get there before the Red Lotus does. Mako leapt into the boat and started the engine. I'm going to then, Bolin said as he clambered after Mako. I need to do something for her. The police are already looking for Korra and Asami should be able to get hold of the military for Tenzin. They don't need us getting in the way. And we're the only ones who know about her parents. Mako shook his head. No. Out of the question. Why not? Bolin blinked. Mako stared away from him. Bolin, you are an earthbender. An earthbender. What chance do you have in the middle of the sea? Bolin pointed at Mako. Firebender. Water kills fire. Mako glanced at him and narrowed his eyes. At least I have fire when I need it. Bolin scooped a few rocks off of the half-destroyed dock. And now I have some earth. He tumbled them end over end in his palm. Water can't exactly kill rock, can it? Mako blinked. You have me there, he conceded. So, Bolin said, smiling. How many are we facing? I didn't actually ask that. Then you really aren't leaving this island without me. We're going to find Korra's parents, Bolin called as he leant over the side and scooped as many rocks as he could reach into his arms. We are going to rescue them. Okay, Mako said with a sigh. He gunned the engine. We go right now, just the two of us. The boat roared away from the dock. Senna frowned as the scratching came again from the front door. What could that be? Some stray pet? A predator? It was already dark outside. She coiled a thin stream of water from the sink, just in case, and crept to the door. As she pulled the door open, her gaze settled onto the hawk standing in the snow. It screeched and peered up at her. Strange. There were few who would bother to send a message at such a cost to the couple. Not taking her eyes from the hawk, Senna crouched down and picked up the tube lying in the snow. The hawk screeched shot off into the sky with a flap of its wings as she gripped the cylinder. Something rattled with a dull thud inside. There was no indication of the sender on the outside, no hint at the origin. Senna unscrewed the lid. Inside was a curled note in a child's shoe. She almost flung the cylinder to the ground. The shoe. She had seen it before, she had sewn it herself, put it along with its partner onto Korra's feet so many years ago. The very same morning Korra vanished. Senna trembled and her legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, her eyes soon flooded with tears. She rubbed at them frantically and with shaking fingers she extracted the note. Tonrik. She had to tell him. Senna struggled to her feet and burst into the bedroom. Tonrik, she gasped in a breathless voice, more tears streaking her cheeks. What is it? Tonrik stared at her and moved to embrace her. Senna shook her head and held out the note. Uncertain, Tonrik took the note and read the document out loud. The Red Lotus has your daughter in Republic City — his voice broke, and he glanced at his wife. She nodded, her hands over her mouth. Tonrik resumed. If you wish to see her again, head to Bato Port on Fugu Island together and inform no one of your destination. You have until midnight tomorrow. This is your first and only chance to see her again. Tonrik stared at the note. What do we do? Senna asked, a shiver running through her as she cradled the shoe, wiping her eyes free of tears. I can hardly believe it, but, this. She held the shoe out to her husband. We have to go, Tonrik said firmly. I don't think we can risk not going. He sighed. The Red Lotus. Tonrik shook his head. Worst possible thing to happen to her. Can we go to Katara or General Kia first? Senna asked. Tonrik shook his head as began pulling clothes out of the wardrobe. I wouldn't want to risk it. Plus the detour might make us miss the deadline. So we go alone? Senna asked. Tonrik nodded. The yacht was for use only by the chieftain, though that did not technically bar Tonrik from using it. Official protocol dictated they get permission first, but Senna was glad when Tonrik ignored the rule. As it was the excuse would not pass muster for long, Unalak had summoned Tonrik to Republic City for an emergency meeting. At least there was no easy way for anyone to authenticate the excuse quickly. Were they drawing too much attention to themselves? They had made the unusual decision of refusing to have any of the ship's crew go with them. Too late now. Despite the lack of other passengers, the boat just did not seem to move fast enough. Neither parent was content to rely on just the ship's engines. Tonrik stood at the back of the boat and water bent a constant surge of water to push them forwards. Senna forced him to rest as he tried to begin a fifth hour, and she took over for the next 4-hour shift to keep their momentum going. They slumped on the deck, exhausted as they neared the Republic City territorial waters and let the boat's motor take over. Senna stared off the prow of the boat. Would it be possible to get hold of Unalak, do you think? Unfortunately not, Tonrik replied with a shake of his head. The best we could do was send a hawk, but I'm not sure where we would get hold of one. And I can't enter the spirit world either. He sighed. Even if I could, I'm not sure I'd want to run the risk. Me neither, Senna added sadly. The boat chugged into the bay and approached Fugu Island, almost there. The port was dark and silent. Senna peered into the blackness. There were other boats moored on the quay, but there was no one else in sight. She glanced at her watch. 2 hours until the deadline, she said. We'll tie up behind the other boats over there, Tonrik said, and guided the boat alongside the dock. The sound of the boat's engine echoed off the empty concrete buildings. Senna winced at the volume. But when Tonrik switched the engine off, the silence was overwhelming. Senna felt uncomfortable, worrying over every sound in the stillness. Do we look for them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Or do we wait? Will Korra be with them? Do dash. Tonrik shushed her and stared out into the dark. Senna lapsed into silence and caught the same noise her husband had. Footsteps. She leaned over the rail, hoping against hope it would be her. It could not be that easy, could it? There were several figures in the darkness, moving towards them. If Korra was there, she was not alone. Senna's hands tightened on the rail, fighting the urge to rush down into the crowd and find her daughter. But in the same moment, she could not disregard everything Tonrik had told her of the Red Lotus. Chief Tonrik. A voice called out. Yes. Tonrik replied. We are the Red Lotus. Thank you for coming so promptly. He bowed. Please. The man in the shadows gestured behind him. I'll be right there, Tonrik said. He lowered voice as he turned to Senna. Stay here. I don't like this. No, Senna said, shaking her head. I won't. I don't care how dangerous it is, I want to see her. I have to see her. Tonrik almost protested, but nodded slowly after a moment. Okay. But stay on your toes. The dock was huge, dark, and empty around Senna as she stepped off the boat. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run where she would not found in a moment. There must be places to hide, bold holes to run to if need be. She took Tonrik's hand as they walked over to the waiting group. You have come alone? The leader asked. Yes, Tonrik said. Then, no one knows you're here? The man asked again, his voice slowing to a lazy drawl. No, Senna replied. Please, where is Korra? You'll see her soon. She could just about make out the man's smile. Senna shivered. What do you mean soon? Is she not here? Tonrik demanded. No, the man said. Then why are we here? Tonrik demanded. Insurance, the man smirked. Someone jerked Senna's arms back and something blazing hot hovered beside her throat. Tonrik, if you wish for both your wife and your daughter to survive the night, you will submit to us now. No bending, no resistance. If you try anything, your wife's life is forfeit. Your daughter will suffer the same fate. And then you will follow. Senna shivered, too anxious to even struggle. Tonrik hesitated for a moment, but nodded and a firebender tied his arms together. Senna's were bound a moment later and the group shoved the couple ahead of them as they walked towards another boat on the quay. The Red Lotus grew less and less polite as they walked, shoving the couple more and more frequently. By the time they steered them onto a waiting boat, they were barely given a moment to scramble down the steep steps and into the hold. The ringleader shoved them down into the hold and stepped over them. Still nothing. He called to someone on the deck above. Lot of police chatter, another voice called from above. Sounds like the attack went off, but we've had no confirmation from the others. The first man scowled. We should at least have had a hawk by now. Keep an ear out. He stalked forward and paused beside Tonrik's head. Don't either of you go anywhere, okay? He smiled and Senna glared at him. She sank back against the deck as he clambered up the stairs. Nothing to be do but wait now. Wait and hope. Was there any chance of seeing Korra at all? Had they simply been too trusting? Senna scowled, furious with herself. They should have tried to say something to someone, anyone. No matter what their instructions were, they had walked right into a trap. She wanted to go back, wanted to change how they had responded to the note. More footsteps on the deck. Senna glanced behind her as two men scrambled down the stairs. No, not men, two boys. So young and mixed up in something as horrible as the Red Lotus. Senna sighed. The first crouched beside them. She flinched away from him. Are you Korra's parents? He asked in a low voice. What kind of sick game are you people playing? Senna said, her voice angry. The second boy shushed her, glancing up the steps to the deck above. We're Korra's friends, the first boy said. We've come to rescue you. Friends? Senna gasped. You're not with the Red Lotus. No, the boy insisted. Korra ran away from them. We met her a few weeks ago, and we've been never mind. You can hear all this later. From her. Senna's eyes flooded and she sniffed, hardly daring to believe him. First we need to get you out of here. I'm Mako and this here's my brother Bolin, the boy continued. You really are her friends. Senna said as Mako loosened her bonds. Yeah, Mako said with a smile. Us and Asami. She's Korra's best friend, he finished a little awkwardly. He shook his head. I just hope we can get you out of here. Listen, Korra's gotten mixed up with some group called the Red Lotus. Mako moved to Tonrik's bindings. We know, Tonrik said. Yeah, but did you know they're using her to assassinate someone? You two are leverage in case Korra doesn't do what they want. Which is what? Tonrik asked. Who do they want her to kill? Senna's stomach dropped. Her daughter a killer? Chief Unalak. My brother. Tonrik exclaimed, getting another shushing from Bolin. Mako stared at Tonrik. They want her to kill her uncle. Wait, Korra is Unalak's niece? So. Bolin said as he crept closer. That makes you a prince. Tonrik nodded. And a minor chief, Tonrik added. And so Korra is kinda like a princess? Bolin asked. Bolin, Mako snapped. We don't have time for this right now. We can't afford to get distracted. Hey, it's not like oh. Quick. Quick, they're coming, Bolin whispered as he looked around the hold in a panic. Water, we need water, Senna said as she rushed to the porthole. Too late, Tonrik muttered and darted forward as two members of the Red Lotus hurried down the stairs. Tonrik pulled back his arm and slugged the first straight in the face. It was the ringleader of the group. The man behind him shot a fireball at Tonrik. Mako caught the blast of fire in his hands and deflected it away. The first man recovered fast and drew a thin stream of water from the pouch on his waist. Water. Senna started forward, needing to pull the liquid away from their opponent and use it against him. But she was too far away and he too powerful. The man pulled the water across his skin, using it to cushion the blows Tonrik rained down upon him. He paused in the midst of his attack and struggled, trying to take control of the water. Bolin darted in front of Senna, a trio of rocks orbiting each other in the air above his palm. Not good. They were all trapped in the hold. Running footsteps on the deck above, reinforcements. Mako and the firebender woman struggled, flames flickering and dancing in the dingy light. Ahead of Senna, Tonrik scored another good hit on the ringleader. As the man doubled over in pain, Tonrik pulled a stream of water into his hand and twisted it into a series of spikes. He sent them hurtling back towards his opponent. The waterbender was too quick. The spikes bounced off a sheet of ice and wound up embedded the pipes just below the ceiling. With a hiss the pipe split open. Gas. Not good. Mako bounced backwards and dispersed his fire dagger, glancing warily up at the damaged pipe. His opponent took no notice and crouched into a fire-bending stance. Wait! Senna called as the air around them ignited. Time became confused. Mako reached out, desperately grabbing at the flames as they burst out from the pipe, the gas igniting in a blink of an eye. The shockwave blasted Bolin and Senna backwards, slamming them into the wall of the cabin as the ship began to roll. Senna fell against the porthole as the ship rolled further, nothing but black water visible outside. Water washed across the floor, pouring down through the hatch from above. No, to the side. The two firebenders floundered in the deepening water as Tonrik and his opponent struggled. Senna managed to brace herself, but a moment later the ship continued its roll and she tumbled with it. The light was everywhere. Every surface around her seemed to glow with an internal light. There were no shadows, no darkness. She could see further than ever before. There were rigid waves in the concrete below her. The droplets of moisture in the gray-haired woman's exhalations were clearly visible. Above her head were more stars than she could have conceived of, more than she had ever seen these last 3 weeks. Everything felt effortless. The steel cable was no hardier than string. The steel plate was like paper. Wind billowed around her, lifting her, as easy to manipulate as fire, earth, or water. But somehow it still resisted her. As much as she reached out, understood all the principles of airbending, it was not under her control. The wind remained alien, unknowable, separate from the other elements. She was flying, ascending up above the metal benders arrayed beneath her. She wanted to keep on going, keep on flying. She could not go back. Not now. That she failed in her assassination attempt did not alter the fact that she had tried to. Something shifted inside her and the world grew darker, the shadows lengthening. She felt heavy again and the air could no longer support her. She sank, not falling towards the ground even as the air struggled to keep her aloft. Would it be enough to prevent her from plummeting onto the hard concrete below? The understanding of air left with the brightness and Korra stumbled as her feet hit concrete. She threw out a hand to brace herself as the strength left her legs, unable to quite stop herself from falling hard against the wall. She was elsewhere now, somewhere away from the cops, away from the Red Lotus. Sea air. There was a powerful scent of salt on the breeze. She was near the ocean. Ahead, the wide expanse of the sea opened out beyond the end of the canal she found herself in. She could go back out to sea and away from the city. Keep moving. Keep going forward. Korra started walking. The city blazed with lights around her but ahead the statue of Avatar Aang was lit only by moonlight. What did he want? Why could he never talk properly to her? Answer her questions, guide her, do anything? Come find me. Aang's voice echoed in her head. She wanted to disobey. Wanted to turn away from this too, seek another path, neither that of the Red Lotus or whatever oblique purpose Aang called out to her for. Korra. The voice called again. Fine, Korra growled. You actually going to talk to me this time? Silence. Well, that was not as much of a surprise. If she wanted to learn anything she needed to play his game. Go back to the monument. Last time she had gone with Asami by boat. There were several nearby, but she did not feel confident in her ability to drive them. Possibly best to not draw any attention to herself either. Sorry Asami, Korra murmured as she stepped down onto the beach. I'm going back without you. She stepped forward, curling the water away from herself as she walked. The sand squelched beneath her feet as she moved farther down the beach and under the water. Dark water closed over Korra's bubble of air. The sand gave way to thick mud and loose rock, her footing becoming unstable and awkward. The water grew darker. Last time something had propelled her and Naga through the water, but not now. Mile after mile of trekking through this would be no fun at all, at least this was a much shorter distance. She could barely see anything now, just the dim glow of the moon high above her. Korra gasped in the cool air as she broke the surface on the island's beach. Mud coated her boots and freezing water had soaked through to her skin. She struggled up the beach, pulling her boots off once she clear of the water. Korra winced with each step as the pebbles and rocks dug into her feet. She almost went back for the boots, but the thought of putting her feet into the cold, soaked footwear made her shiver. Best to press on. It seemed to take years to hobble up the rocky shore, her feet gingerly finding spots to step as she tried to avoid any more pain. It was a relief to at last reach the smooth concrete of the path. Korra paused and waited until the stinging of her feet faded a little. The museum was dark and silent when she reached it. What did she expect? Jinora would not be here. Neither would any of the other guides. No one who might give her any answers. Avatar Aang, she called out. Silence. Aang, talk to me, she demanded. Still nothing. You asked me to come find you. This is the third time I've come here. Was I wrong? Do you want me to go south instead? Am I supposed to meet Katara? Nothing. Please, tell me. Talk to me. Nothing. Korra sighed, tears pricking her eyes in frustration. A flame flickered into life in her palm and she stared around the familiar exhibits by flickering firelight. Everything seemed familiar, mundane, tedious. There was Aang's robe, Appa's saddle, the glider with the hidden compartment, a family picture. Korra frowned. Somehow she had overlooked the framed image before. As she leaned closer, it became clear the picture was a photograph just like the ones Asami had, like Mako and Bolin had. Like she should have, the one Asami arranged earlier in the evening. How would it have looked? How would she have looked alongside Asami, Bolin and Mako? It would have been nice to see. Another regret. The photograph here was larger than the ones she had seen before. There was the monk from her dream, there could be no mistaking him. The water tribe woman beside him, that had to be Katara. And the three children in front of him, which was Master Tenzin. And who were Aang's other two children? Other airbenders, or waterbenders. A boy, a girl, and a baby of indeterminate gender. All stared out of the image, smiling. The girl, she looked familiar somehow. Had she been in a dream too? Aang, Korra said. Please, talk to me. Her fingers pressed against the cold glass in front of the image. I need your help. I don't know what I should do. I don't know who I can go to now. Asami. My friend Asami, I don't know if she would want anything to do with me now. Or Bolin. Or Mako. But. She let out a ragged breath. I want to see them again. She slumped beside the picture and spoke towards the darkened ceiling, towards the huge statue of Aang above. Was everything Zahir told me a lie? He said you were wrong, that you did the wrong thing, but it doesn't feel right. Everyone loved you here. You created this city, you stopped the Fire Lord. Surely that can't make you bad? Bolin told me you saved the world. He said you were one of the greatest avatars in recorded history. Tears pricked her eyes again. I don't want to believe Zahir anymore. But when he talks, it all makes sense somehow. But when I was with Bolin, you sounded so amazing, so great. And. Korra pulled her legs to her chest and rested her head on her knees. He tried to kill me. I was in the way and he just didn't care. He told her to kill him and it didn't matter, I was in front of him. Her only answer was silence. Naga was gone. Asami was gone. Mako was gone. Bolin was gone. The Red Lotus were gone. Heisuk, Hiroshi, Toza. Even Jinora. There was no one she could go to now, no one she could talk to. She wanted to change the world, improve it, make it better. The things she fought against, the things she wanted to change, were they all lies? No, not all of them. The poverty of the slums was very real. The orphaned children with no futures were real. Her injuries throbbed. Her palms stung, her feet were sore, her arms were burnt. Scratches, scrapes, cuts and burns covered every inch of her. Pain blossomed deep inside her skull and Korra drew in on herself a little tighter. Maybe she just needed sleep. Maybe that might help her forget everything. Sleep sounded good. Wake up tomorrow and find it was all just a bad dream, Asami shaking her awake to join her for breakfast before she left for work. Or maybe it would be one of Asami's days off and they could do something. Anything. Exhaustion seemed to settle across her like a blanket, with the thought in her eyes felt heavy. Before Zahir's moment of intimacy earlier in the evening, her teachers never touched her like Asami. As Bolin did. They didn't joke, laugh or relax. Their whole time with her centered on training, and only training. There was a new burst of pain deep inside. She had been so proud of her arms when Asami complimented her. But she was only like that because of them. Was there nothing in her life that was not linked to them? Was because of them? Peely once told her she loved Zahir. Her friends seemed to love each other, love other people in their lives. No one had ever said they loved Korra. But she loved them all, the Red Lotus and her friends. Even Minghu seemed to revel in the cruelty all around her. Could Gazan and Peely have been doing anything but pretend to like her? They killed Yujin. They killed her because she was in the way. What if Korra had not been able to stop them from hurting Asami, Mako and Bolin? Might they also now be lying dead in the mansion grounds? Were they still alive? Other Red Lotus members could have taken the chance to eliminate them as soon as she left? No. No, she had to believe they were alive. Even if she could never see them again, they could not be dead. She would not be able to cope if those three were dead now. Wait. There was something moving nearby. Korra lifted her head, weighing up her options. Hope for someone to comfort her, or flee before they could see her. There was a tinkling of broken pottery in the distance and something panting. Her heart leapt. Could it be? Naga, Korra croaked as the polar bear dog lumbered towards her, knocked her to the ground and began lapping at her face. She hugged her pet, not caring about the damp, cold fur against her skin. Korra pressed her face close to Naga's, breathing in her scent. Hey girl, Korra murmured. Did you miss me? Naga barked softly and lapped at her tears. I'm sorry, Korra said. I promise I won't leave you behind ever again. Naga barked again and settled down beside her. Korra struggled to sit up and stroked her hand through Naga's fur. The polar bear dog rested her head in Korra's lap and stared up at her with huge eyes. Korra smiled and planted a kiss on Naga's head. Her pet replied in kind by licking at Korra's neck. Hey, Korra exclaimed and squirmed. That tickles. She was not alone, her best friend was right beside her. She was not alone, not anymore. A few more moments like this, a few more minutes of quiet contented sitting and they would begin moving. Begin seeking out their new life. Away from the city, away from everyone. Tenzin snatched up the phone as it rang. Lin. Tenzin, Lin replied. She sounded exasperated. We found her, and we kinda lost her again. What? Tenzin, I'm sorry. We thought. What happened? Tenzin asked, his hand gripping the receiver tighter. A lot. First up, the Red Lotus did go after Chief Unalak in the council meeting. Cho, Kim, and 6 guards are dead. No. Did she? I don't think so. We're still trying to collate the reports, but it sounds like it was the others. Mostly. Lin. We worry about that later, Tenzin. Tarlok's in pretty bad shape and... Lin sighed. Unalak and his family are in critical condition. Spirits. Yeah. There's more too. Lin swallowed. Looks like the Red Lotus turned on Korra for some reason. They left her behind and it looks like they might have tried to take her out before they went. What? So she betrayed them. Tenzin exclaimed. Could be. Tenzin, she. Remember you told me some of the things your dad could do. What kind of things? Tenzin asked with a sinking feeling. Tenzin, we had her cornered. We had her pinned down and she still got away. She tore her way through enough steel cable to keep Oji on the ground. Tenzin, her eyes were glowing. The Avatar state, Tenzin muttered. Do you know where she went? Sorry. Lin sounded frustrated. Couldn't see much at the time. Keep looking please. I'm trying to get hold of Bumi to help, Tenzin said, staring out through the window as he watched for Bolin. Thanks. Oh. Any chance you could call in Kia too? Tenzin frowned at the tone of Lin's voice. I would, but she's at the South Pole. I'm hoping Mom will get in touch with her when the Hawks arrive. Ah, okay. I'll keep you posted if we find anything. Thanks. Tenzin glanced up as Asami burst into the room. Where are the others? He asked. Asami scowled and shook her head. One of your acolytes talked. She winced and Tenzin frowned. Asami shook her head. The Red Lotus have lured Korra's parents here. What? Tenzin gasped. Asami nodded and explained what she learned. Mako was talking about going over there. She glanced behind her. I think maybe he and Bolin have gone over there. If it's a trap they might need help. I'll try and get the United Forces to send an airship over there. Tenzin said. About that, Asami asked. Bolin said something about you having radio problems. Tenzin gestured to the radio. Asami crouched beside the device, searching through the frequencies. After long minutes of work she slumped back. No good. Physics is against us. The mountains are blocking anything from getting through. We'd need a different relay point. Somewhere up high. Asami frowned. Somewhere really high up. Like on a mountain or maybe. Asami trailed off. No. No time for that now. Sorry. Thank you for trying anyway. If it was daylight I would just take Oji and search myself. I don't think we have time to waste right now, said Tenzin. How about the police? Asami asked. Bafong's searching right now. But I still think we need more help. The only other person I would be certain we could trust would be General Iroh. There was a sound in the distance. Asami frowned. Is that Naga barking? Could be. Tenzin passed her the receiver. Stay here and keep trying. I'll see what's up with her. He stared out the window, peering into the darkness. Was there someone else out there? If you can't get through, try Suyin and Zaofu. Zaofu? Asami exclaimed. Yes. Any problems, just give them my name. Tenzin, are you sure you should go out there on your own? Pema asked. I'll be fine, Tenzin said. This wouldn't be the first time I've fought the Red Lotus. He smiled and snatched up his glider from beside the door. If anything happens, ring the bells. I'll be back right away. The door slammed behind him and with a last worried look, Pema threw the bolts across. Suddenly this did not seem the best of plans. The gloom had only gotten deeper and Asami had been somewhat vague on just what had happened to the two traitors. Best get into the air fast. He snapped open his glider and with a flick of his hand sent himself up into the sky. Best to check the island first. Two bodies on the beach. He dived down, his former acolytes. And there was a boat missing from the dock. Looked like Mako and Bolin had indeed headed off to the meeting point. He needed to secure the Red Lotus members elsewhere at some point. No sign of Naga. Tenzin frowned. Something as large as her and with her coloration should be easy to spot even in the low light. Where was she? He circled the island again and spotted something white out of the corner of his eye. There. The polar bear dog was floundering through the water towards Memorial Island. Naga barked as she lumbered up the beach and into the museum. Tenzin tilted the glider and sailed through the night after her. No boats at the island. Strange. He made one loop around the statue of his father, there was no one visible down there. Hopefully this was not another Red Lotus trap. He took one last glance back towards Air Temple Island before diving down to the beach. No new boats there and no sound of bells. Everything seemed to be okay, for now. Tenzin dropped to the ground, moving with as much stealth as possible. The glider collapsed with a flick of his wrist and he darted forward. Something odd on the beach. Just past the surf was a pair of boots, small, possibly a woman's. It could just be coincidence, just flotsam from the harbor, but hope flared inside him. Tenzin left the boots and approached the museum. Something shattered ahead of him. Naga? Someone was talking in a low voice, illuminated by a flaring ball of fire in her hand. It was a girl, about 18, Naga curled beside her. The girl was sat beneath the photograph of his family. She was from the water tribe, though her clothes were black and unfamiliar. They were burnt, torn, and damaged. Her eyes swollen and inflamed, the skin on her arms mottled and burnt. She needed healing urgently. His voice trembled as he spoke. Avatar Korra. She glanced up, her eyes widening. Avatar Aang. She gasped. He shook his head. Sorry, I am not my father. Master Tenzin. She said. Tenzin nodded. You are. Avatar Korra. Yeah. Korra said, ducking her head. Tenzin crouched on the floor opposite her. He could scarcely believe it. She was here. After all these years, all the searching, every false lead. Avatar Korra had finally reached him. Sorry, I was really hoping your father might finally talk to me properly. I have a lot to ask him. Tenzin sighed. Avatar Korra dash. Korra is fine, she interjected. Might be just as well. I was kind of pissed at him. She smiled, the expression dazzling through her injuries. At least you're not some random monk. Her gaze drifted and slowly returned to him. Jinora seems a wonderful daughter, she said as she scratched Naga's head. Thank you, Tenzin said. He caught sight of the inflamed skin on Korra's palm. Korra, are you hurt? She shook her head. I'm fine. No, Tenzin frowned. No, you need some help. He studied her for a few moments. Please come back with me. Korra shook her head. I can't. Korra, your friends came to find me. She stared at him and blinked. My friends? Yes. Asami, Bolin and Mako. And Naga. Korra's eyes widened and she clasped her hands to her mouth. They came to ask me for help. They did. Korra's voice was almost a whimper. Yes. And if you come back with me, you can see them. But No, Tenzin said. Not now. You need medical attention. Tenzin stood up. So, please come back with me. Korra stared at the floor for a moment. What do you think? She asked Naga. The polar bear dog barked and she smiled. Okay. Let's go then. The avatar winced as she got to her feet. Do you need help? Tenzin asked. Korra shook her head. I'll be okay. They walked to the beach in silence. Did you not bring a boat? Tenzin smiled. No. I used this, he said and flicked his glider open. Not sure I can manage that. Korra smiled. What do you say, girl? Okay with carrying me? Naga barked and Korra scrambled onto her back. Tenzin twisted a cushion of air beneath him and floated just beside her. I'll fly beside you, Tenzin said. Naga waded down into the water and began swimming. This next part was going to be awkward. Korra? I have heard of some of what happened earlier this evening. Korra sighed. And somehow you're still talking to me and inviting me to your home. Tenzin shifted his hands on the crossbar. I want to know what happened. From you. He raised his voice a little over the sound of Naga's paddling. I doubt what you've heard can be any worse than what I did, Korra said, her voice tight. I'm sure there's more to it than that. Did you believe what you were doing was right? Or was it the Red Lotus who made you do those things? I don't know anymore. Her voice broke as she answered, her head drooping to her chest. Korra? It's okay, Tenzin said quickly. You're safe now. That's what matters. I will do everything I can to help you. Korra scowled. I wanted Aang's help, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Even if I could somehow talk to him, he's probably reincarnated into a tree or something. Korra? Aang is not a tree. Oh, alright, some great ruler or an air bison or dash. Korra, Aang reincarnated into you. Korra froze. Me. She turned to stare at Tenzin. They taught you nothing, did they? Tenzin asked, scowling, glancing ahead to Air Temple Island. Being the Avatar is so much more than simply inheriting the ability to control all four elements. The Avatar's soul, ever since the very first Avatar, has been reborn into each successive Avatar. Korra, you are Aang's reincarnation. Korra blinked and stared ahead. After a moment she turned to him and grinned. So, does that make you my son? Kind of. Tenzin narrowed his eyes and glanced at her. Very kind of. Oh, this is weird, Korra said, rubbing her temples. But he can still talk to me? Jinora said something like that. Tenzin smiled. It's complicated. There have been centuries of study of the connections between successive generations of the Avatar. We still do not fully understand it. Did Aang skip those lessons? All he seemed to be able to do was ask me to come find him. Tenzin sighed. I wouldn't actually put it past him. I mean, we can work on improving your connection to him. Really? Korra looked amazed. Aren't you just going to turn me over to the police after this? Tenzin shook his head. I have been waiting for this day ever since you were born. The world needs you. So I will do everything in my power to avoid giving you to the police. I'm not sure what's going to happen from here on out, but we will straighten this mess out. And as soon as we can we will work on improving your connection to your inner self through meditation. With practice you will be able to talk to Aang's spirit. Korra frowned. Wait. Do you think? Could Aang not have wanted me to come to Republic City in the first place? I don't know. I can't imagine Aang would have wanted you to stay there, so I think perhaps he might have brought you here. Korra, we've been searching for you for years. Your parents, well, hopefully you can see them soon, but ... Korra's face had turned white. My parents are still alive. She gasped. Yes, Tenzin said softly. They never gave up on you. And neither did I. He lied about that too. Was any of it true? Korra clenched her hands in Naga's fur. All of them. I was so sad when they took me. They said they were keeping me safe after Mom and Dad died. Her whole body shook and her face scrunched into a scowl. She screeched in rage, panicking Naga for a moment. I never wanted to believe they were cruel. I thought. No, I can't believe I ever chose them over my friends. If only I had come to you sooner. I just never wanted. I was scared. And now people are suffering. Korra stared down at Naga's back for a long moment. Can I see them soon? Tenzin clenched his jaw. Korra, there's a problem, and it's not good. The Red Lotus have captured your parents. Mako and Bolin have gone to try and rescue them. Where are they? Korra asked, her voice almost a whisper. Bato Port, it's on Fugu Island. Korra, there's a boat on Air Temple Island. So is Asami. We're going to do what we can for your injuries and help them. We'll get you to your parents and reunite you with all your friends. Book 1 Healing. Chapter 17, Korra's Decision. Dark. Absolute darkness in all directions. Bolin blinked, the movements of his eyelids making no difference to what he could see. Or rather, could not see. At least he could still feel and also still breath. He was standing waist deep in freezing water. Bolin took a deep breath and held it. There were other people breathing in the dark. Mako. I'm here, a voice came from his left. Could you brighten the place up a bit? Bolin asked. No chance. Mako sighed. I'd be worried that some of that gas is in here. If I ignite that then we're really finished. Something splashed in the water nearby, the motion sloshing the water all around him. A warm, wet object grabbed his hand. Another hand. Mako's. Are you both okay? A new voice. Female. Yeah, Bolin said. Sorry that the rescue didn't go that well. Korra's mom. It's Senna, the voice corrected. And don't apologize. I'm so grateful you came for us. And, we can't give up just yet. She's right, someone else said, the deep voice resonating in the dark space. Tonrik. Senna asked. Are you okay? I'm fine, he replied. But we can't just stay here. I'm going to see if there's a way out. Be careful, Senna said as he splashed into the water, the movement unbalancing Bolin as the water shifted. There was a momentary sensation of something moving past his leg and the water calmed. No one said anything for a long moment. So, now we wait. Bolin asked. This would be a great time for you to realize you're a metal bender, Mako said. Bolin sighed. I tried it 100 times. You know that. I just can't do it. You need to try again, Mako insisted. Bolin bit his lip. Do you want to save Korra? Mako asked. Yes, Bolin replied, clenching his fists. Then try harder. Fine. Bolin gritted his teeth and reached out, straining for the metal. How was this supposed to work again? Impurities in the metal, that was the key. Not to think of it as metal, not really, but to think of it as something containing hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny particles of rock. Rock that he could manipulate, rock that was as natural to move as his arms. He pressed on with his mind. Nothing. Focus smaller. Still nothing. Tiniest thing he could think of, something smaller than gravel. Still nothing. It's not good, Bolin said with a gasp. I just can't. We will get out of here, Senna insisted. Tonrik will find a way out. The conversation died again and everything was silent save for the sound of 3 people breathing. Bolin jumped as something surfaced. Tonrik panted in the dark. I'll look again, he said between heavy breaths and vanished beneath the surface again. What must it be like down there? Nothing to see, navigating solely by touch, knowing that you only had so much air in your lungs so would need to go back up to get more from a diminishing supply that was keeping your only companions and your wife alive. No. Now was not the time to think about that. There was a disturbance somewhere below and the water lapped at his body with renewed force. Had Tonrik found a way out? Wait. No. The water was rising. Fast. It was already at his chest and a moment later his feet were no longer on the deck. Oh no. No 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 no, he said, tilting his head towards the ceiling. I'll try to hold it off, Senna said, shifting in the water somewhere ahead of him. The water swished and swirled but did not withdraw. He was still floating. Something jarred against his head. The floor. Mako, Bolin whimpered as he felt tears well up in his eyes. Bolin, Mako said, squeezing his hand tighter. Water really was the death of me, huh? He spluttered and coughed. Pretty unremarkable way to go. Not quite what I would have had in mind. Least of all having it happen with you. You're supposed to outlive me. It could not end like this. Bolin strained once again, trying to clutch at the metal above him, around him, everywhere. Where did his rocks go? Could he somehow get closer to the rock on the sea floor? Sorry I couldn't protect you, Mako spluttered. I love you. I love you too, Mako, Bolin replied as a wave washed over his face and left him spluttering. He reached out hoping to catch even the edge of a nearby rock. The water rose higher. Peely sat slumped in their hideout and stared down at her hands. She had tried to kill Korra. No. She had tried to kill Unalak. Korra had simply been in the way. Refused to get out of the way. Given her no choice. That was all there was to it. Simple. No. Not so simple. She had fired upon her student. Put as much destructive energy into that one blast as possible. Still, Korra might have survived it. She at least could have bent the fire away from herself. Peely had let Zahir goad her into attacking. Let him demand she put her own feelings to one side and strike through Korra at their target. Her shoulder still ached from the grip of his fingers. His voice had been harsh and angry when he commanded her. A shiver ran through her. She barely remembered the aftermath. The metal benders entering the building and her frantic attack to drive them away. The panicked run as they moved deeper into the building, away from the carnage, away from Korra. Down back stairs and along cramped passageways. Ming stumbling and wheezing, Gazan holding her up. Zahir leading the charge, almost unaware his companions followed him. And her. Wanting in every moment to go back, to check if Korra was okay. Hoping for the best. Fearing for the worst. There could be no good outcome. The air bison at least were not worn or injured. They flew them away without a problem. And still Peely resisted the urge to look back. Might she catch a glimpse of what happened? No. No, it was too late. She had made her choice in the moment she attacked for the second time. When Zahir had directed her actions against the Avatar. The past was set and there was no way to alter it. She would have to deal with the outcome. Pili, stop crying, Ming said with an exaggerated sigh. Leave her alone, Gazan retorted from his spot near the window. Not you as well. Does no one else have the strength of their convictions? She snarled. It's not that. Pili glanced up. Gazan was shaking his head. I still want to change the world. It's just. It's more difficult than I expected, he said. Ming grimaced. You are both emotionally compromised. Are you somehow ignorant of what just happened? We cannot stop now. If you want to leave, then leave. Don't allow yourselves to become a burden to the mission. The tip of one of Ming's tentacles froze as she spoke. Pili's gaze became fixed on the icy point. But should we meet again, I will not be merciful. Ming, Zahir said sharply. Do not dismiss their feelings so quickly. He stalked over to Pili and sat beside her. She tried not to flinch as he rested his hand against her back. Tried not to shudder as he slipped his arms around her. It's okay, he murmured. I know it was difficult. You were so strong. No, she muttered. I was weak. You did well. His fingers gripped her chin, his touch soft and gentle. So different to the pained grip he had held her shoulder with. She let him turn her head to face him. Resisted the urge to pull back as he leaned in to kiss her. But she could not respond to his advance. It felt wrong. She ducked her head as he drew away. All those years wasted. We spent more than a decade on that, child. Her resistance is beyond disappointing. Ming fumed. Zahir sighed and turned away, Pili grateful when his touch left her. And what do we do now? Gazan asked. We never prepared for this. If she's still alive. Will she come after us? I'm not sure if we can still beat her, he said as his fingers traced along a long line of bruises that ran his entire arm. What if she winds up with the police? Or the United Forces? He scowled. What if Tarlok helps her? We can't hope to defend against a bloodbender. Oh, wonderful, Ming shouted. Let's think of every possible bad outcome from this situation. Let's sit around and think of every way the Avatar could kill us. Listen to me, Ming leapt from her perch and advanced on Gazan. We will fight to our last breath. How quickly you seem to have forgotten this is not the first time we angered the Avatar. If we remain together, even if we lose every other member of the Red Lotus, we can still endure. Nothing can take us down. The room fell silent. You're right, Pili said as she raised her head after a long pause. Ming's right, Gazan. We are the Red Lotus. We destroy the old and forge the world anew. Korra. Her tears threatened to overwhelm her. No. She could no longer think of her in the same way. Not after she tried to destroy her. I was prepared to change the world before we met her. I let her distract me from that. Yes. Yes, Zahir said beside her. She is but another obstacle. I was foolish to think we could turn her to our way of thinking. We must continue. Pili nodded along as Ming spoke up. Free humanity. Ming smiled. Prepare for harmonic convergence and the return of the spirits. It's what we wanted, Pili breathed. Visions danced in her head. No conflict, no fighting. A world they could live happily within. A world in which she might relax and no longer keep watch for harm from others. And maybe she could have a new child there. A product of her and Zahir's union, not a stolen relic of a brutal, unnecessary system. There was still so much to do, but there were so many possibilities ahead of them. Gazan sighed. I can't leave. He waved his hand dismissively. There's nothing out there for me. You three are all the family I had left in the entire world. He smiled. There is no shame in having doubts, Zahir said. There is no shame in confessing them, Gazan, Pili. I know you were more attached to Korra than we might have intended. But we can no longer afford to think of her in the same way. The Avatar can be nothing but our enemy now. And we must be prepared if she has survived. I must ask you both to let go any feelings you might have had for her. She may have begun the process of reincarnation, or she may yet live. Either way, she is no longer our student. She is everything we must fight against. He paused. At least we are prepared for her survival. Pili had known them longer than Korra. Suffered more for them. Killed for them. What was the Avatar but a wide-eyed child who could not see the world for what it was? These three were those she must protect. We must not forget that our family is bigger, even if we four share a closer bond. Ming frowned. Where are the others? The hawk from Air Temple Island is overdue, Zahir said. He scowled. There is a chance they have been captured. How were they caught? He made an angry noise in his throat. Zahir cut himself off when the radio sputtered into life. Pili's body twitched at the noise, anticipating the subject. What is it? Zahir said in a tight voice, his fingers gripped the edge of the radio painfully. A sigh on the other end. We have bad news, Tonrik and his wife are dead. Nara and Wan too. What? Zahir said, his voice low. How could this happen? We captured them without issue, but something went wrong on the boat. There was some kind of confrontation in the hold. We don't know what happened, but something exploded down there. The boat went down right after. Is it too much to hope for a firebender to control herself? Zahir sneered. He sighed. You are certain none of them survived? Yeah. I sent Jury to try and reach it. No good, she couldn't make it that far down. Even if they survived the explosion, they can't have nearly enough air. Spirits, Ming muttered as Gazan shifted his footing and Pili stared at the floor. A strange calm enveloped him. It was all over now. There was nothing left. You may have doomed us, he murmured. Daumki's voice was tinny as he asked for clarification, but Zahir ignored it. Korra's friends. It had to be that trio. Even if Tenzin had somehow overcome the spies on Air Temple Island, he would not be able to deal with the Fugu Island team alone. Had they realized? Had they known the whole time? Did that Sato woman and the other two kids know the Avatar had been in their midst? Zahir sighed. Once more, he fixated on the past. But their dreams had taken so long to reach this point, and all for naught it seemed. 14 years of work, training, and patience, and this was the result. An Avatar who balked at the last moment and forced them to attack her. It had left their most important first target in a state of unknown health. Left them hiding in this warehouse in the middle of nowhere as the other teams failed in their tasks or managed unwanted outcomes. The advantages of their years of careful hiding had been undone. What had gone so wrong? Korra. It all centered around her. He had underestimated her rebellious tendencies. They had allowed her compassion and spared her feelings when they should have been cruel and vindictive. That pet was a mistake. It allowed her to stubbornly adhere to a morality so opposed to their own. And despite his limited meditation training of Korra, Aang had somehow managed to contact her. A year before harmonic convergence, no less. Could it have begun so much earlier? How much had Korra kept hidden and never revealed to her teachers? Was it an innate ability in the end? That the bond between avatars was unbreakable? Was obfuscating the connection the best they could ever hope for? Every plan had failed. Korra's parents were gone too. They needed a new contingency plan. No Korra. No Tonrik or Senna. No way of reaching out to the Avatar. He could use the spirit world, but Korra could not access it. He growled in frustration. His refusal to train her now prevented him from contacting her. If they could only dredge the Avatar's parents from the bay, then at least they could announce them as hostages. Broadcast to the world. She would hear it or would soon hear of it. Betray the Red Lotus again, and neither Senna nor Tonrik would live another moment. An effective threat. A stray thought, retrieve Naga from the Sato mansion. The life Korra cared so deeply for. Another potential bargaining chip. No. No, that would not work. There would be police there, or at least many on alert there. The Sato mansion would be a trap if they set foot there again. Zahir closed his eyes. If Unalaq survived, there would soon be a city-wide search. The current absence of that was perhaps at least a good sign. Lee might have successfully eliminated him in that blast. It might also have killed Korra. The removal of the Avatar and the head of the Water Tribe would be a good first step. No. He could not afford to be so optimistic. The United Forces and police operatives were suspiciously silent. Think. If her friends went to Tenzin, what then? Tenzin would contact Bufang. Perhaps his brother and Zuko or his grandson as well. The operatives were as close to the men as possible, but there were no hawks, no phone calls from any of them. Lack of communication could be both good or bad. Perhaps the issue on Air Temple Island had led to the death of the hawk and the cutting of the phone wires. The police could still be unaware of their presence in the city. The radio news of the mansion attack did not mention the Red Lotus by name either. Conversely, perhaps both the police and United Forces knew precisely what was occurring. Maybe a certain paranoia on those related to Aang had prevented news reaching their operatives. If they even were their operatives anymore. They could have uncovered or converted years before. There was a touch on his shoulder. He glanced back and smiled at Lee, his mental burden seeming to shift. Somehow it felt less overwhelming now with her here. And yet she still looked haunted. For all her bravery, for all her words, the moment she had struck at Korra waited on her. A pain like that, would that he could take it away from her. Would that it was never necessary in the first place. If only Korra had behaved as expected. No. He was dwelling on the past once more. A gamble then. They could still claim to hold the hostages. And there was one single individual within the city who posed an acceptable threat and retained an almost priceless value. Zahir smirked. Not the first time there had been no way out. He could do it again. He could still change the world. One man's sacrifice, independent of Unalak's survival, would do the trick. Zahir opened his eyes and grabbed the radio. He called the Fugu Island team. Yes. A voice said suspiciously. It's me, Zahir replied gruffly. Withdraw from the island. But what about the hostages? Zahir kept his voice stern. As you said, they are either dead or vitally assured of it. Leave them. Go to the base of the Chenbai mountain. What good are we going to do there? Zahir smiled, his plan spread out before him in his mind's eye. I want to know if anyone is climbing to the summit. Asami jigged her leg as she stared out of the window. The phone continued to ring in her ear. This was pointless. She needed to be out there, helping. Chi blocking would render them unable to use their innate elemental abilities. If nothing else, it would level the playing field somewhat. Ah, and the shock glove. That could be effective. Though it would take a while to get back and retrieve it, but even the prototype, with the voltage cranked up, could do some damage. Hello. You have reached the United Forces main office, Yoko speaking, how may I assist you? Asami nearly dropped the phone. Hi, she said as she fumbled the receiver. Asami straightened and tried to keep her voice level. My name is Asami Sato. It is a matter of utmost urgency that I speak to General Iroh. Ah, Miss Sato, Yoko replied. A pause. The general is currently talking to your father in his office. He arrived on the base a little while ago in something of a panic. He demanded the United Forces engage in a search and rescue mission for you. He did what? Asami blinked. Did the general call my father? Oh no. No. Not happening. Asami hunched over. She barely felt the tug on her sleeve. Did you get in trouble? Ikki asked. Is your dad going to ground you for being out at night with two boys and not telling him? Even though you're all grown up. Asami looked up at Tenzin's youngest daughter. 'Cause my dad dash. Ikki, her mother hissed. This is serious. Look, if you're bored, please go and help Milo keep an eye out upstairs. Ah, but Mom. She gave her daughter a stern look. Fine. I'm going. Ikki stomped away, her footsteps echoing as she climbed the stairs. Miss Sato? Yoko asked. Hello, yes, sorry. Asami said, speaking quickly. Please tell General Iroh that I have information about the Avatar. There was another pause at the other end of the line. Really, Miss Sato. We get so many dash dot. Tell him this call is being placed from Air Temple Island, Asami continued over her interjection. Tell him. Asami glanced at the other woman. Tell him it's from Tenzin's wife, not me. In fact, don't even mention my name. Pema, the other woman supplied with a smile. Asami smiled back. Tell him the call's from Pema. Now. Okay. Huh. Okay, so the call is coming from the island. Okay. Please hold the line for a moment. The line went quiet. Asami held the receiver out. Maybe you should talk to him first. Since he's expecting you and everything. Pema took the received. You're good at this. Really? Asami smiled weakly. Right now I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. This was been a very busy evening. It sounds it. Later on, oh hello, Iroh. Pema smiled at Asami. Yes, it's really me. No, I'm fine. More or less. No. I think you should talk to the other lady here. Okay, I'll pass you over. Pema held the received out and Asami put it against her ear. General Iroh. You sound familiar. Oh, you're Dash. Yes, Asami Sato. We spoke briefly earlier. And you have gotten to Air Temple Island, I understand. Iroh asked. Yes. Your father Dash. We can talk later. Really, don't worry about anything he's told you. This is of the utmost importance. We found the Avatar. Her name is Korra and she's been taken by some group who call themselves the Red Lotus. She was abducted earlier this evening. We're out of the way here so we're not sure what's been happening, but we do know the Red Lotus lured her parents to Fugu Island. My friend's Dash. Asami stopped. Could she still consider Mako a friend after what he did earlier? She swallowed. Like the conversation with her father, that would have to wait until later. Korra's friends. She could still not in good grace call Mako her friend. They went to warn them. Is there anything you could do as well? Iroh was silent a moment. I will need to try and contact Commander Bumi, he said. But Dash. We tried that, Asami interrupted. Oh. Do you have a different relay point you can use? I couldn't find a way past the mountains. Mountains? Iroh asked. Oh, don't tell me. He sighed. I'll try and get a hawk sent over there or something. In any case, I will send a few units to Fugu Island to see what they can do. There was some muttering away from the phone, and the electronic beat of telegraphs in the distance. She translated a few words out of habit, but most made no sense at all. Military jargon? I will call back when I have some news. Wait, Asami said hurriedly. The Red Lotus infiltrated the White Lotus. They attacked Tenzin, Asami said. Iroh was silent another moment. I should be careful about who I trust then. Asami smiled. Exactly. Your warning is noted, Miss Sato. Bumi would be best for this situation, but there are one or two others I trust. Thank you. Before I forget, can you describe them? Them? Asami asked. The Red Lotus. Or at least the ones you saw. Asami briefly described the quartet from earlier in the evening. They survived, he murmured. Thank you, Miss Sato. I will do everything in my power to help Korra's parents. If I remember right, this would be Chief Tonrik and Senna. Yes, Asami said, nodding. I will see to it they are safely delivered to her. Thank you again, Miss Sato. He was silent for another moment. I will tell your father where you are. He's been quite worried. Asami smiled. Please. Don't tell him where. Just say I'm perfectly okay. And find Korra's parents. And if she's still missing, please, help look for Korra. We won't rest until we do. I will call when I hear anything. I am leaving instructions that calls from his number will be forwarded directly to me. Thank you, Asami said as the line went quiet. Jinora stood on tiptoes nearby. Is that? She peered closer at the window. It is. Dad's on his way back, Jinora said. With Naga. She tilted her head to one side. There's someone on her back. Asami darted to the window and followed the direction Jinora pointed in. Sure enough, there was the distinct white shape of Naga in the water. And someone dressed in black on her back. Could it be? Asami ran for the door, rattled it, unlocked it and darted out into the cold air. Jinora was just behind her. There was a waft of air. Ikki and Milo had joined them after leaping from the roof. It was only a short run to the beach. Asami skidded to a halt just as it sloped down to the water, Jinora beside her. Is that Korra? Asami gasped and ran down the beach. Tenzin swooped towards her, but Asami ignored him. Naga was lumbering in the shallows as Korra slid off her back and into the water. Asami did not even pause, she splashed out into the water. Korra, she said again as she slammed into her friend, flinging her arms around her. Korra stepped back as they touched. For a moment, worry. Korra was tense, stiff, and now stood frozen to the spot. The moment stretched out, each passing second seeming more and more awkward. Then a touch on her back. Arms around her waist. A head against her shoulder. The return of the comforting pressure and the embrace. Korra hugged her back. Asami, she whispered. Asami sniffed. You're all right. You're safe, she muttered into the strange black fabric on Korra's shoulder. She never wanted to let go, never wanted the moment to end. But her boots were filling up with cold seawater. And it seemed more than likely that Ikki was taking far too great an interest in her relationships. Asami relaxed her grip, not wanting to let go, but to at least see Korra. She gasped. Asami dropped her arms and reached out gingerly as she caught sight of the multitude of burns, scratches and cuts that covered Korra. You're hurt. What did they do to you? Asami, Korra shook her head. How did you know to come here? It took a moment for her words to make sense. Asami blinked and shot her a wry smile. I figured you out. Korra, you have to be the Avatar. Korra opened her mouth to reply. No. Even if you told me in Bolin you weren't. No other reason why you would have a fire-bending, an earth-bending, and a water-bending teacher like that. So, I was right the whole time. So was Bolin. Korra ducked her head. Sorry, she muttered. If I'd told you before, none of this would have happened. It's my fault. No. No, it's mine. I should have said something when we first met. But worrying about that is not going to do us any good. And even then, it's their fault. All them. Blame the Red Lotus. Korra looked up, tears running from her eyes. Asami's smile faded. She had never seen Korra like this before. She wrapped her arms around the Avatar as Korra folded her arms up over her chest, her hands clasped together. Korra sobbed against her shoulder and Asami pulled her closer, one hand stroking her hair. They took me from my family. They were training me to kill people. And I thought love. Asami hushed her. No, Korra said, her voice thick. I thought I loved them all. I thought they loved me. Korra sniffed and shivered against Asami. All these years. I kept thinking about looking for you. I couldn't ever forget one little thing you told me back then. You made me not afraid of the world. They made it sound so horrible. I always liked yours better, and you were right. Korra shifted her head on Asami's shoulder, her arms finally unfolding and circling Asami's waist. I always worried about you waiting in the snow for me and me never arriving, and I wanted to say sorry for that. Again. And. Now you know who I really am, she sniffed. I don't want to think what I would be like if I hadn't met you. You would always be the person you really are. Asami squeezed her a little tighter. And even if it was different, you would still be the same wonderful, caring, beautiful woman you are now, Asami said as she stroked her hair. They could never change that about you. And no matter what, I would still meet you. Somehow. Thank you, Korra sniffed, nuzzling her head against Asami's shoulder. You're pretty amazing yourself. Asami smiled. And don't worry. They won't take you ever again. I will not let them, I promise. Asami blinked, feeling tears prick at her eyes. It was hard to shake the feeling of responsibility for so much of the trouble. She could have tried to tell someone back then. Not just let the adults dismiss her mystery girl as unimportant, but insist on what she had seen. Korra might have had a normal life with her parents. Made new friends. Been the Avatar younger, done more for the world. Maybe they could have stayed together? A lovely daydream, the two of them inseparable, her and Korra. Korra felt another weight shift from inside her. Asami was wonderfully warm against her, the hug everything she needed and more, comforting and calming. So different to Zahir's manipulative show of affection. She let out a sigh and looked up over Asami's shoulder. Tenzin was stood with his family, who were all studiously avoiding staring at her. Or at least everyone aside from two of Tenzin's children. The boy had his back to her, and the girl was grinning. Reluctant to let the moment end, Korra stepped back. Asami smiled at her and let go. Korra could not stop herself smiling back. Something flared in the back of her mind. Hope. She dared to hope it would all be okay in the end. Tenzin, she said, her hand groping for and clutching Asami's. Korra, Tenzin bowed. If I might introduce my family. He gestured to them in turn. My wife, Pema. Jinora you already know, and these two are Milo and Ikki. His face became stern. My father never got a chance to meet his grandchildren directly, but I am glad they can at least meet you. Hello, Korra said tentatively. Jinora ran forward, Milo and Ikki dawdling a little behind. Jinora threw her arms around her, though Tenzin's other children were a little reticent. It only took a moment for them to copy their sister and rush down the beach to her. Korra let go of Asami's hand to embrace the trio. Hi, guys. More tears trickled down her face. She caught Asami's concerned look. Korra smiled. Last time I cried at night, I swear, she said. She freed one hand and wiped it across her eyes. Wow. Grandpa's reincarnation is super pretty, Ikki said. It was only then that the momentous nature of her offhand comment to Tenzin became clear. In a very real way, these kids were her grandchildren. Still in her teens and a grandmother. Korra smiled wider. Her family was bigger than she might have ever suspected. On that note, are Mako and Bolin still away? She disentangled herself from the children. Tenzin, you said you had a boat. You're going after them? Asami asked. Yeah, Korra murmured. Where is Fugu Island? She asked slowly, turning to scan the darkened harbor. It's dash. Master Tenzin, a voice shouted. An air acolyte scrambled down onto the beach in a panic. Tuga. Tenzin frowned. What is it? He looked past the man and muttered something under his breath. His body tensed, his stance shifting as if ready for combat, but in such a way that would not be obvious to an opponent. Korra followed his lead, all her senses going into alert as she readied to fight. There's a radio call for you. From a man. Surely it can wait. Tenzin said. Tuga shook his head. He says his name is Zahir. Korra scowled. Her body shook and a growl escaped her lips. Korra. Asami asked. She reached out to touch her arm. He's the man who killed Yujin, Korra muttered, clenching her teeth. Asami gasped and took a step backward, her hand over her mouth. He's the leader of the Red Lotus, Tenzin added. What can he want with me? He glanced around. I'm afraid we cannot ignore him. Tenzin ran back to the pagoda, the others following in his wake. Scattered acolytes stared at Korra as she ran past. Did they know? Wait, no. Her injuries. What did she look like right now? Pema grabbed Tuga as they entered the pagoda. Bandages. And the medikit. Quick, she said as she leaned against a nearby wall, panting. Korra stumbled inside, looking around the interior. Asami slammed and locked the door behind her. Tenzin slowed as he approached the telephone. He grabbed an acolyte. There are 2 men on the beach. Please, restrain them somewhere and be careful, one is a firebender, the other is an earthbender. The acolyte hurried away and Tenzin took a deep breath as he clicked the radio on. Zahir, he said, his voice steady. Tenzin, Zahir's voice sounded from the radio. Korra trembled, the shivers racking her body. She started forward and halted. Pema had taken hold of her hand. Let him speak. For now. Here. She guided Korra to the nearest chair as Tuga reappeared with a bag. Pema began sifting through supplies, and began cleaning her up. She rubbed ointment into burns, cleaned away the dried blood and sea salt. Tuga returned a moment later and dropped a pair of sandals beside the chair. They looked to be about Korra's size. She thanked him, leaning forward even as Pema wound bandages around her arms. It's better he not know you're here, Pema said in a low voice. Korra looked at her, only now noticing the swell of her belly. She was pregnant. It could not be long until she gave birth. Another grandchild. Another life the Red Lotus must not endanger. I lost contact with my team on Air Temple Island, Zahir said, playing it casual over the crackling radio. I can only assume something happened to the pair. Tenzin frowned. Airbenders do not kill, Zahir. They are both still alive. There was a chuckle. They might not be so grateful for that in the end. Though, I would be very interested in just how you were able to get them to talk. What makes you think we did? Tenzin asked. Certain factors. A sigh. There's no sense playing games, Master Tenzin. His tone was mocking. Somehow you got them to tell you about the hostages on Fugu Island. I can only imagine how excited they were to see Korra again. Though that's really not going to be a possibility for much longer. Let me talk to them. To be sure this is not a bluff. Oh, would that it were, Tenzin. I would not have called you like this if I could demonstrate I had them so easily. Tenzin glanced around, his eyes meeting Korra's for a second. He ducked his head. What have you done? He hissed. I would ask your accomplices the same question. If I could. Thanks to them, they, Tonrik and Senna are trapped in a boat at the bottom of the bay. Tenzin gasped, trying to keep his posture steady. They really can't have much air left by now. Where exactly are they? Zahir sounded far too pleased with himself. And that is where you come in. If you want to know, if you want the faintest hope of saving them, you will take your air bison and come alone to the Luenferg Bridge. There is a message waiting for you there. Follow these, very simple instructions and we will contact your wife with the precise location of the ship. She can relay the message to whoever she wants. If you are quick enough, they might even live. Tenzin glanced around. Korra still stared at him. How do I know you're telling the truth? You will have to trust me. Oh, well, I suppose you could send a hawk to the South Pole to Tonrik and see if you get a response, but I really don't think you have that kind of time to waste, Tenzin. Sea burial is supposed to be done after they're dead, not before. Every second you delay now makes their deaths all the more likely. Leave now and do nothing that will make us break our end of the deal. The radio fell silent. Tenzin took a deep breath. He turned to Pema. I have to go. Pema shook her head. No. There must be some other way. Maybe the Coast Guard --. Tenzin shook his head. If I don't go. He looked up to meet Korra's gaze. Korra will never see her parents. I'll go, Korra said as she stood up. It's me they want. I'm far more useful to them. Wait, Asami called. She was crouched beside the radio, staring at something. Their signal, it's coming from 32 degrees northeast of here. She smiled at Tenzin and Korra. Map? Do you have a map? Pema hurried over with a thick, folder map. Asami shook it open at speed. Korra was a pace behind Pema, staring down at the chart as Asami spread it out on the floor. Asami's finger rested on Air Temple Island. They could be anywhere in this direction, she said, tracing a line across the paper. Korra stared at the map, trying to reconcile it with the city she had seen so many times recently. That section, that side of the city was less familiar, less visited. But she recognized a few landmarks. Some things could not help but be familiar. Especially, there. One spot Gazan at least would have the advantage. And somewhere offering them a good view of the city. I know where they are, Korra said. Where? Asami asked, looking up at her. Korra shook her head and ran for the door. She grabbed Tenzin's glider as she hauled the door open. "Don't follow me, Korra," Tenzin said. "It's me they want in the end. And they might be expecting me to show up. I'll get them to talk. And I'll get the location of my parents out of them." "Korra," Asami said. "It's my choice, Asami," Korra replied, staring into her eyes. "I can do this." Asami stepped forward and hugged her. "Just make sure you come back, all right?" she whispered. "I will," Korra said, her lips quirking into a smile. "We will liaise with the United Forces in case dash." "No," Korra said, stepping back from Asami. "This is my fight." "Are you sure I can't help?" Asami asked. Korra shook her head. "I don't want you to get hurt. They're killers." Korra felt queasy. "I guess you know that." Asami nodded slowly. "But if I'm too late, if my parents, Bolin, and Mako will all be gone. If that happened, then. She swallowed. "I couldn't stand to lose you as well. Please just be safe," she blurted. Korra Asami began. Korra turned on her heel and ran. "I'll be back," she called to Naga as she ran past. Korra turned on the edge of an outcrop to take one last look back at the pagoda. "I'll be back, I promise," she shouted as she turned again and flicked the glider open. The wind was all around her here. And she could use it. It was still awkward, it was still not quite understandable. If she did this, and concentrated here, a breeze. An increasingly intense breeze that lifted her up off the ground. Still different to the other elements. She could not feel the air in the same way, could not quite understand how it worked. It required effort, concentration, so unlike the second nature of the others. So much she did not know. Why this gesture whipped the wind all around her, while this one did nothing. Korra jumped forward. Her hands and feet settled onto the glider's controls like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she had done this all once before. Well. That was true, was it not? She reached out and pushed the air again. It responded. Still not perfect, still not graceful, but enough to do what she needed. The glider trembled and swayed as she bent another gust of wind beneath her and behind her. The air was freezing cold as it blew against her skin, but it did not matter. Finally she could fly. And now she would end this. "We have to follow her," Tenzin said as the phone rang. Pema snatched it up. "Hello? Yes. Yes. No. No, we're safe here," she said. "They what? Is everyone dash? Hello? Hello?" Pema stared at the receiver and slowly replaced it. "The line went dead," she said, staring down at the phone. "The Red Lotus are attacking the United Forces headquarters." She snatched the phone back up and dialed a number. She stood tense for a moment and then let the receiver tumble out of her hand. "No good. Tenzin, stay with your family," Asami said. "Protect them. I'm going to help Korra." She ran from the house, ignoring Tenzin's protests behind her. If she survived this, she was going to go training with Korra and Bolin. She was going to get fit. She needed to be able to keep up with Korra. The Avatar could run for miles without losing her breath after all. Meanwhile Asami's lungs already burned with the effort, but she ignored the pain and kept moving. She could not afford exhaustion right now. It was vital to keep going. To go 32 degrees northeast of Air Temple Island. Or perhaps, Luenfurg Bridge would be a better starting point. Her boat was still tied up at the dock. Asami leapt into it, scrambling for the rope. The knots seemed to resist her, and for a moment she wished she had a knife to simply cut through. After painful moments of pushing and straining at the knots, they came undone. At last. She threw the throttle forward and sped off across the bay. The trip passed in almost a blur. The city lights growing larger as she raced towards them, the freezing wind chapping her skin and lips as she stared forward. The boat skipped across the waves, dull thuds of waves against the hull. She could not even stand to sit and instead rested against the controls as she hurtled over the water. By the time she reached the Republic City side, she had recovered her breath. No time to secure the boat, it was replaceable, just a thing. She left it to drift as she hauled herself up onto the dock. The car was missing. Again. Another loss, another stolen car. Stolen or impounded. There had been those police cars after her earlier. Asami shook her head. No time to worry about that now. Plenty of other automobiles right nearby. She clambered into the nearest roofless car, her body feeling awkward and not as graceful as she wanted. Everything seemed to take too long. She felt so lumbering and slow and wanted to shout at the unfairness of it, wanted to be ruthless speed and elegance. No time for that. She tried to push the thoughts to the back of her mind as she pulled at the wiring under the car's dashboard. I'll replace it, she sang as a mantra as she twisted two wires together and started the engine. Asami struggled into the driver's seat, only now realizing the model she had chosen. This is getting expensive, she said to herself as she stomped the accelerator and screeched off along the dock. I think Korra will owe me dinner after this. At least 2 dates, I think. Talking to herself now? So many things to worry about later. She murmured directions as she skidded around corners, ignoring road signs and angry shouts. Asami counted down the miles, dividing the clock with the speedometer. 5 minutes more. The plant was not far away. She left the automobile idling across 2 parking spaces, not wanting to spare the moment to break the connection. The car had been fine to get her here, but it restricted her options. A smaller vehicle would be better. And fortunately the factory had one such option, the new, all-terrain Sato bike. There had been bikes before, but this was the latest model and had the fastest engine available. Just what she needed right now. But first, armor. If she was going to fight, she was not going to be defenseless. Asami thanked the spirits that Future Industries had so many differing projects. She ran into the plant, flicking light switches as she went, skidding around corners if she was able to. After a while she stopped bothering, preferring to run into the wall and push herself off and around the corner. Here. Storage. Suddenly nothing seemed where it should have been. Asami raced around the warehouse in subdued panic, pulling open one box after another looking for what she needed. Any other day she would have known where each box was, what the number of items were and even the serial number. Right now it was like she was a thief in the night looking for the best loot. Wait. This box. Padded clothing to cover her chi points? Check. How about an electric-powered tonfa? Asami dithered, itching to move as she considered it. No, the battery was far too heavy to let her move as fast as she wanted. The shock glove would have been perfect right now. If I live through this. If she lives through this, I'm finishing it first thing tomorrow, Asami promised the empty warehouse. She turned on her heel and ran back to the bike. Okay, maybe not first thing tomorrow. A rest sounds good. The day after. More weapons would be nice, but she did not have the luxury of time. Asami raced to the bike. Okay. Deep breath. And ready. She flicked the radio on. Dramas, news, and now, the weather, drifted from the speaker before she gave up and clicked it off again. Nothing so far, she hoped, expected that Zahir would be broadcasting himself again. As long as he did not rely on the phone, she might be able to catch him speaking. The bike would be noisy, but it was too late to reconsider her choice. She needed all the help she could muster for herself. Maybe another vehicle would be better. Then she could take the tonfa? No. No time to waste. Time to go. The Luenfurg Bridge was not far, and she blazed a new and faster trail through the night time. It took no more than 10 minutes to get there, but each minute felt like a century. She cut the engine half a block away and peered at the bridge. There was no one in sight. Asami scowled. So it had been a trap? No, there would be someone here if so. A delaying tactic then. A way to get Tenzin alone or at least away from his family. Just as well he was safe back on Air Temple Island. Asami tried the radio again. A burst of music, another drama, then, Zahir's voice. It was quiet, only just audible over the static. She tweaked the dial with trembling fingers, straining to keep them steady as she tried to zero in on the voice. Fight, don't let, as long as. He said over hissing static. His voice faded to nothing as she lost him in the morass of white noise. Asami swore and tried to find him again, twisting the dial with agonized patience as she hunted for the right frequency. Was that his voice? Hard to tell over the rushing hiss that dominated the unused radio bands. But she remembered the dial position she heard him on. At least she had seen the direction and the strength of the signal. Just a matter of a bit of quick mathematics and some hasty mental imagery. There. Zahir was on the mountain, the nearby peak that had once been a volcano. At the top or the bottom she could not tell, but he was there. It was enough. Time for a rematch, she muttered as she gunned the engine and raced towards the mountain. Book 1, Healing. Chapter 18, Rebellion. Senna pushed the water back as hard as she could. The pressure kept increasing and the effort to keep their tiny bubble of air safe was beginning to sap her strength. Something thrashed in the water beside her as the brothers started saying their goodbyes. Her husband panted in the remaining pocket of air. I've found the way out. You kids aren't going to die young. Tonrik wheezed for a moment and his voice steadied. The way out is clear of debris, but it's a long way down. Senna, I need your help. What do you need? She asked. I'm going to flip the boat from the outside. I need you bend the water to one side of the ship as it moves. Was it possible? The boat was so heavy, before taking into account the water filling it. Even with control of that water it would be difficult. No. They had to try. I'm ready. Korra was waiting for them. Somewhere. We're going to get out of here. All of us. Tonrik took another deep breath and with a splash he dove down into the depths again. Mako? Bolin? Senna asked. I can't tell how deep we sank, but as soon as Tonrik has the boat turned over I'm not going to be able to hold the bubble anymore. So we need to hold our breaths, right? Mako asked. Right, Senna said. She reached out and clasped both their hands. The timing would be critical. Be ready on my signal. Oh okay, Bolin replied. I'm ready, Mako said. Korra's friends had to survive this. So much to talk about and the water began to shift. A tremor flashed through the water and the boat's hull creaked around them. Senna concentrated and bent the water to help push the vessel. The deck above their heads began to tilt as the ship rolled. The air bubble would not last much longer. Now, Senna shouted, her voice loud in the enclosed space. The water washed over them a moment later. The boat turned further, the movement dragging her with it, and she fought to keep herself oriented in the same direction. She needed to have at least some idea of where up was. Both of the boys' hands tensed in her grip. They had made it this far at least. Senna blinked. There was light. The moon was above her, dulled, darkened by the depth, but there. She could finally see again. There was a ragged hole in the hull above them. It did not look that wide. Not the time to worry about that. Senna pushed herself upward, bending the water behind her. Now she had a direction and destination to head in. She tensed as she passed through the hole, relieved when she emerged into open water. A moment later she lost her grip on one of the boys. She looked down in a panic. His scarf had snagged on the jagged metal of the aperture. The pressure in her lungs was growing. She had time, but not much. Maybe not enough. She wanted to scream, but there was no time for that, nor enough air. She pushed herself back down to the boat and grabbed the trailing end of the scarf. Best not to think about how long this was taking. Or that neither of her companions had moved or struggled in a while. The scarf tore, the sound distant in the water. Now upwards. How far to the surface? Impossible to tell in the gloom. The moon's light grew steadily brighter as they rose. But how much further? She kicked her legs, using the water to keep Korra's friends moving up with her. Her lungs burned, her chest ached. She needed to take a new breath. Needed to get just a gasp of air to keep on going. But there was only water against her lips. And if she tried to breathe now? A movement nearby. Tonrik. He swam up out of the darkness, the outline of the sunken ship just about visible below them. He grabbed her hand and twisted the other around in a spiral. He was trying to form a water spout. She nodded and began bending the water, hoping her timing was right and that she was helping rather than hindering her husband. The water surged around the four of them and the moon's glow became dazzling. She gasped, inhaling some droplets of water along with precious air. She coughed and spluttered but kept breathing. The air was freezing cold. Her throat, lungs, and chest chilled in moments, but she was beyond caring. Senna trod water as she gulped down lungful after lungful of air. Her breathing slowed and the dizziness in her head began to fade. Her other senses came into focus, the coldness of the water around her, the ache of her overexerted limbs. Tonrik frowned, staring at the brothers. They're not breathing. Senna nodded. We need to get them out of the water. Tonrik shifted his hands and froze a section of seawater nearby. He took the boy with the scarf. Mako maybe? Unceremoniously he shoved the boy up onto the ice sheet, pushing Bolin up a moment later. Senna hauled herself onto the temporary platform, ignoring the chill on her hands and knees. This at least she had done before. So many accidents in the villages with the children and some of the adults. She had always been glad that her parents insisted on teaching her how to save someone from drowning when she was younger. The moon was full and bright above her. There could no better time to do this. Senna closed her eyes and knelt between the two unconscious bodies. Water. Water all around her. Focus. Ice underneath. Focus. Bodies. Bodies full of water. Focus. Some water in the wrong places. She gritted her teeth and searched. There. That had to be the lungs. And that had to be the stomach. If she had more time she would be more sure. It would be horrific if she stripped the water out of a vital organ. But this would have to do. Deep breath. And she flicked both hands, pulling at the water. It streamed out of both boys and a moment later they coughed and spluttered. That took wheezing, shuddering breaths as they shivered on the ice. Senna sighed in relief and opened her eyes. Bolin was sitting up, one hand rubbing at his throat. Mako remained flat on his back, staring upwards, chest rising and falling with exaggerated care. Ugh, Bolin croaked. Tonrik put his hand on Senna's back. That was magnificent, he said and kissed her. Senna smiled. Are you two all right? She asked the brothers. Yeah, think so, Bolin replied in a hoarse voice. On her other side, Mako wavered as he pushed himself upright. You saved us. Thank you, he said, Bolin echoing his thanks a moment later. Senna shook her head. We should really be thanking you. If you hadn't show up. She trailed off. Bolin shivered again, hugging himself as Mako glanced around. Probably not the best idea to start a fire here, huh? His teeth chattered. I hate being soaked. Senna shook her head. No, not the best plan. But I can try and help. This was much easier, trivial even under the light of the full moon. She drew the water from their skin, from her skin, from Tonrik's skin. She drove as much water as she dared from their clothing, not wanting to destroy them. Thanks, Bolin said. That was pretty cool. Mako peered into the gloom. Doesn't look like the Red Lotus are still around. Then we should get moving in case they come back, Tonrik said. Air Temple Island might be the best place to get to, Bolin said. Their house seems the safest spot in the city right now. Tonrik nodded. Though I think we should find a boat first. Traveling by iceberg is not the best method. Fugu Island's the closest place. And we left our boat there. But if the Red Lotus are still around. Mako trailed off. Senna shook her head. We'll be ready for them this time. Tonrik smiled as he raised himself up and with a surge, sent the ice sheet sailing towards the dock. Bolin whipped his head to either side as they approached the dock. "Aw man, they took our boat," Bolin said, as they clambered off the ice. "All these boats are junky." "Oh, hey." He disappeared into one of the warehouses. Tonrik eyed a nearby boat. "This one should at least work." He dropped down into it. "Not the fastest but it should have us to Air Temple Island in about an hour." "Hey Mako," Bolin called. "Look what I found," he said, pushing the warehouse door open wider. Bolin was stood beside what looked like a metal boat with a tall structure in the middle. An assortment of ropes lead to a huge expanse of cloth. A balloon, Mako said. He smiled. That would work too. Senna frowned at them. Don't they need a firebender to keep them up? Yeah. But we have Mako. Tonrik shook his head. You take it. Go on ahead and let Tenzin know we're okay. Mako shook his head. With all due respect, sir, we need to keep you safe. And with all respect, Tonrik said. We are more than capable of taking care of ourselves. We will not allow ourselves to fall prey to the Red Lotus again. We can take the slower boat. Come on, Mako. You said you always wanted to try flying, Bolin said. Mako nodded reluctantly after a pause. His brother smiled and dragged the gondola into the open. Oh yeah. Just in case, he said as he tore sections of the dock up. He dropped the jagged chunks into the gondola with heavy clangs. We'll let them know you're on the way, Mako said as he leapt into the balloon and shot some fire into the central chamber. Mako kept channeling fire into the furnace and the balloon began to inflate. It did not take long before it towered above them and the gondola rocked on the dock. Mako shot another blast of fire into it and the balloon began to rise. Make sure you do get there safely, he called as Bolin scrambled into the gondola. A thought struck Senna. Wait, she said as the balloon rose. Please, tell me, what does my daughter look like? Bolin smiled down. A lot like you, ma'am. A little bit taller and younger, obviously. She has long wavy hair down to her shoulders. Her eyes are light blue. She's beautiful. I mean. He trailed off and flushed. You'll see her soon, Mako interrupted. He glanced at his brother. It was a pretty accurate description though. Thank you, Senna said and smiled, a vision in her mind of her daughter. Please let them meet soon. We owe you a great deal. Our pleasure, Bolin grinned. See you guys later. Korra was so high up. She bent more and more wind beneath the glider. Under any other circumstance the chance to see the nighttime city by air would be spectacular. She might have swooped and soared, just to see what there was. But not now. Not with everything that had happened, that might happen. Now she barely noticed the city, her gaze fixed dead ahead at the mountain. They would be at the summit she was sure, but where? Korra let the wind fall beneath the sails as she flew down towards the pinnacle of the former volcano. There was something there. A tickle in the back of her mind, some sense of persons. 4 persons. They were not far away and the intensity of the impression in her mind became sharper as she closed the distance. There was an ebb of elemental forces within 3 of them. Rock there. Fire in that one. Water in the third. And nothing in the last. Emptiness, a void where there should have been something. Strange. Would she see all benders like that now? Would all non-benders be like Zahir? Or was he different for some reason? Empty but not because he lacked bending ability. Empty for another reason entirely. No matter, it was the least of her worries at present. She swooped down to the mountain, ready to cushion her fall to the rocks, to approach the group by stealth. Zahir broke cover and stared up at her, his eyes wide. The wind faltered beneath her sail and she dropped down to the rock, only just cushioning her fall. Korra scrambled to her feet. Korra, Zahir said. What a pleasant surprise, I expected Tenzin. He did not smile. He did not approach. He stood ready for combat, his muscles on the verge of tensing. Zahir was watching her carefully. Korra set her jaw. Tell Tenzin where my parents are. Do that and I might spare you. The words felt harsh in her throat, the threat unpleasant as it spilled from her lips. Zahir watched her impassively. There was a crunch of gravel and his companions stepped into the open behind him. Tears threatened to flood her eyes but she blinked them back. No. She could not afford to feel sorry for any of them. Not anymore. Why did you lie? I've seen the truth with my own eyes. You've seen too little, Zahir said. I've seen enough to know you deceived me, Korra said. Why did you do it? We did nothing of the kind, Zahir frowned. The world is corrupt and wretched. There are wars, slavery, oppression, cruelty, and abuses of power every day. I am certain that you have seen some of these occur on a daily basis, have you not? Korra said nothing. I'm sure your so-called friends would concur that it occurs all too often. But there's more than that, Korra insisted. There are good people too. People who want to help. Not everyone is bad. Zahir shook his head. A handful in so vast a number. You refuse to accept the truth even now. Because playing at being the Avatar with your friends like a child is more important than being the Avatar and fixing the world. Korra growled. Don't even start. I can't believe anything you say. You've lied too many times. And never once let me make up my own mind about anything. You just locked me away and tried to make me believe your version. Zahir shrugged. Don't believe me then. But I hope you are prepared for the rest of the world. Korra blinked. What do you mean? Republic City is less than representative of the other nations. Oh, you might find this kind of settlement in the Fire Nation. But the cities are ruled by the rich, built on the blood and toil of others. The Fire Nation holds so much of the world's wealth, it is unbalanced. You should visit the rest of the Earth Kingdom, I guarantee it will not be all pleasant. Or perhaps you might be shocked at the state of your birthplace. Enough, Korra shouted. You are wasting my time. Tell me no, tell Tenzin where my parents are. Talk. The group were tense. They stared back with cold, steady gazes, each of them tensed and ready. They feared her. Could she beat them? If she had to fight all four, could she be victorious this time? Zahir had still not said what she wanted to hear. A cold sensation trickled into her belly. Liars. Always lying. Even lying about her parents' whereabouts. Or perhaps that they were even alive in the first place. No. She could not start doubting that. Talk, she scowled. I offer you a final chance, Korra, Zahir said. We will forgive your rebellion with the Water Tribe Chief. We will welcome you back into our fold. I know that you do not believe me anymore, but our desire for changing the world has not changed. The Avatar can help with that. Korra shook her head. No. Not again. Not ever. I don't want to kill anyone. I want to help people. I want to see my parents. Zahir said nothing. You can't even dangle that in front of me. Korra scoffed. You can't even risk letting me see my parents and then deciding to help you. The choice is still yours, Zahir said. Then no. 1,000 times no, Korra shot back in anger. So be it, Ming snarled from behind Zahir. He bowed his head. Ming, no, Peely cried as swirling fog swept over the ground and hid them from view. Where are they? Korra demanded. No reply. She scowled. They could not do this now. How long could her parents have? She darted forward and found nothing. Cowards, she muttered as she scanned around herself. Just tell me what I want to know. Listen. Sense. Sense like before. No good, something had changed. There was no sense of others nearby. No sensation of another bender in the vicinity. Korra strained her hearing. Nothing. No crunch of gravel. No whispered, faint breathing. Silence. At last the fog began to dissipate, revealing the starry sky above her once more. Something shot out of the vestiges of fog nearby. A coiling band of water, tipped with ice. 3 others joined it, skimming over the ground, aimed right at her. Simple enough. She darted away from them. The tips glittered with reflected starlight. Easy to see even in the dim light. The next blow took her by surprise. An additional, thick tentacle of water had crashed into her back, forcing her down to the ground. Korra rolled out from under it, looking around wildly. 4 more tentacles, these without frozen tips. Much harder to see. Korra scowled. She tore sections of rock from the mountainside, pulling up pillars for protection. A shower of water droplets rained down as the water tentacles hit. There was a popping in the distance and a streak of fire. It did not touch her or the mountain. Strange. Korra frowned at the seeming misaimed attack. She winced as her shoulder stung. Probably a stone shard or something. She raised her hands ready for the next attack, ignoring the nuisance sensation. If Zahir decided to join Ming, she was going to need to cover her chi points. Her shoulder felt strange as she moved. A break in the fog, Zahir. He was right in front of her, not looking at her and instead fiddling with a tube. Peely stood beside her, her face a mask of concentration. Korra darted forward and the popping noise came once more. The ground a few steps ahead of her exploded. She spun away from the strike. Her limbs felt sluggish. Her body refused to respond as fast as she wanted. Each movement seemed frustratingly labored when it should be lightning quick. She was out of step with herself, her rhythm off. Korra stumbled and fell onto her back. The sting in her shoulder became harder to ignore. Her fingers probed her bare skin, seeking out the splinter. Instead she found something else. A needle protruded from her shoulder. She dug it out and stared at it uncomprehending. It was a short silver needle with a feathered flight at one end. Even with it no longer in her, a strange weight seemed to press down onto her. Korra grunted in pain, trying not to make her location clear. If that was even in question. She had to get moving. What was the dart? It looked like it was hollow. Had it contained something before? Had Zahir used it to put something inside of her? Her fingers dug at her skin, uselessly trying to get the contents back. The thought made her queasy. What had been in that needle? Her vision was getting blurry and her head was swimming. Ming cackled somewhere in the distance. Not feeling too good now, are you? No. She could not afford to let them get the best of her. Not now. She struggled upright, fighting back against the weight. Every muscle strained, but she pushed herself up. She was panting, exhausted, but could at least still move. Defense. She did not trust herself to move as fast as she had. She needed a shield, but quicker than earth or rock. The mist. Korra reached out and drew the water out of the air, curling it into her hands. Time to get moving. The first step was the worst, until the second step made her wish she had given up and just lain on the ground. No. She could do this. Something bright ahead of her. Magma. Korra scowled. It would not last long, but with a stomp of her foot she threw a barrier of rock up to push the flow away. It did little good, the magma seemed to growing in size. This was where lava bending would have come in so handy. The glow of the magma hid the red lotus from her. The glare from the molten rock was too bright, her eyesight too blurry to see much. No. She could work this out. It would be foolish for Gazan to lava bend and be in its path. The red lotus would be on higher ground and safe, away from the lava. They would try and keep it between them and her. She staggered forward, keeping her ball of water swirling in her grip. A hazy movement just ahead of her. The hiss of water on superheated rock. Ming. She could just about make out the swift-moving blur. Could just about see her water tentacles as they sped through the intervening space towards her. Too fast. This time ice tipped all the tentacles, the frozen water glowing orange in the lava glow. No chance of avoiding it. But maybe she did not have to. Korra expanded the ball of water out. As soon as the ice entered the water barrier, she froze it and pulled. She melted the ice as she started turning on the spot, coiling the water around herself. The movement made her stomach heave, but she concentrated on uncoiling the water. It was no longer clear if Ming was charging towards her or Korra was pulling her forwards. Hopefully the latter. With a final pivot, Ming was right beside her and then flung aside by Korra's momentum. All her water now curled around Korra, under the Avatar's control. She shifted the burden, letting it flow to her middle as an orbiting band of water. Ming, Gazan yelled as he ran towards the defenseless waterbender. Another series of pops. Peely had not given up. Movement was so tiring. A pool at her feet to freeze with the water. The effort is almost too much as she countered the heat of the magma. Korra slid away from two benders she could see and hopefully away from the third elsewhere. Another pop. Too late to try and dodge. Korra froze some water in front of her, the shield absorbing a lot of the kinetic energy but in the same moment evaporating the fluid. She did not have an unending supply. If it came to it, she would lose a battle of attrition like this. Move to the offensive. She sprayed a stream of water along the ground, freezing it in place. With a push and a ripple in the ice she pushed herself forward. The remaining water slid from her waist and along her arms, 2 water whips at the ready. She could not bring herself to freeze the points. Another series of pops from dead ahead. Korra lurched to one side. An explosion just behind her. Use it, the force pushed her forward. Peely right ahead. And there, Zahir with his pipe. He fiddled with the end of it, raising it to his lips. Another shot? If one made her feel this terrible, another was likely to leave her incapacitated for good. Something shot out of the tree with a roar, moving fast, wobbling a bit as it steadied itself. A woman with long, wavy hair was riding a motorbike, the vehicle accelerating as it hit the ground. Asami. Asami was here and she was trying to ram Zahir. Mako, I didn't want to complain, but I'm not sure we're going to wind up at Air Temple Island at this rate. We're kind drifting towards the city, Bolin said as he peered over the edge of the gondola. Mako scowled. There has to be some way to direct these things. There should be some flaps or something. He stared up at the balloon. I refuse to believe there is no way of steering it. Bolin squinted around the limited space. Oh, hey. Maybe these ropes do something. He tugged on the nearest and the balloon lurched, tilting as it pointed towards the city. Now we're getting somewhere. So, Air Temple Island is over there. Bolin, pull that one open. Mako pointed. Bolin tugged on the indicated rope. The balloon slowly turned in the opposite direction, no longer pointed right at the city. Was this really going to be quicker than the boat with Korra's parents? Speaking of which, they still needed to find her. I still don't quite believe it, Bolin said as he stared at the city. Believe what? That Korra's the Avatar. Mako gave the balloon another blast of fire. Well, that's understandable. I mean, it's just cause Asami is so certain in everything but we've only ever seen her mess with one element. Yeah. Though it made sense. I mean I asked her once before and she said no, but... Bolin paused. Still a bit odd she never had of Aang though. I mean, did she never get any bedtime stories when she was younger? Bolin, can you imagine any of those guys being the type who'd read to her like that? Mako said dryly. Bolin tilted his head to one side. Okay, so, no. And hey, they kind of were like evil step-parents who locked her away far away. He blinked. Hey, I was right about that too. Mako chuckled. You were. But if you'd told me half of your weird theories I'd have banned you from your dramas forever. Ah, now that's a little too extreme. Really? Mako grinned. I would have thought you couldn't tell reality and fiction anymore. Just be glad we got confirmation from Asami, Mako said. She might like those things as much as you do, but she at least has her feet firmly on the ground. Bolin shrugged. It's not quite like the dramas though. Usually those dramas have the Avatar helping the rest of the cast. Usually he swoops in and saves everyone. They're never like this. If only we'd known sooner. Bolin trailed off. Yeah. Mako nodded. I know. But she was never going to tell us. She never even told Asami and those two were together like all the time. Mako frowned, shaking his head a moment later. Korra's been real secretive ever since we met her. That's true. And she has so many secrets. Bolin sat up. I mean, I bet she doesn't know she's a princess and the Avatar. I doubt they told her that either. The balloon was silent for a moment. You know, I don't think Korra's life would work for a radio drama so easy anymore, Bolin said at last. Mako peered at his brother. Really? You and Asami were on the verge of writing the script right then and there. Bolin smiled. Well, it would still be a great plot, but I think we need to make it less sad maybe? Like she can still be an awesome water tribe princess and the Avatar and a pro bender player. And she can still meet her childhood friend years later thanks to two guys who mugged her, who then met her in an alley. I just think there should be all that without taking her away from her parents. I mean, what if she hears the broadcast and it's all about her childhood and being taken from her parents and... Mako let out a soft breath. Yeah. Not something she'd really want reminding of. So we need to do something happier instead, Bolin said with a smile. Have her with her mom and dad. And see where things went after this part. Hey, Bolin called as he spotted Tenzin's kids at the top of the pagoda. Oh hey. Hi Mako. Hi Bolin, Jinora called. We were worried the Red Lotus got you. What? Why? Bolin asked. One of them called on the radio. Said you were sunk along with Korra's parents, Ikki said. They said you were going to die. Okay, that was kind of true, but Korra's mom and dad got us out, Mako said. Really? Cool, Ikki said. Where are they? Jinora asked. On a boat headed your way, Mako called back. Mako? Bolin. Tenzin leaned out of a window further down the pagoda. Hi Master Tenzin, Bolin called. Is Asami there? No. She was. Then she went after Korra, Tenzin replied. Wait, Korra was here? Bolin blinked. Briefly. Jinora grinned. The guy called Zahir told us they had you and her parents. They wanted Dad to go see them, but Korra went instead. And Asami followed her? Mako asked. Yep, Jinora said. Bro Bolin said. Yeah, I know, Mako replied. Which way? One moment, Tenzin said and ducked back inside the pagoda. A moment later he was up with the rest of his children. Here, he said and flung something into the gondola. A map. Bolin unfolded it, a red line circled Air Temple Island with a line emanating from it. Asami said they were somewhere along that line, Korra seemed to know exactly where. Mako peered over Bolin's shoulder. She could be anywhere, Bolin said. Look, the line goes through loads of the city. And the mountains, Mako added. We can follow the route, but I bet they're on the volcano. Bolin blinked at his brother. Trust me, Bolin. Okay. Thanks guys, Bolin called as Mako got the balloon turned around. And get some towels ready for Korra's parents. And some hot drinks. Is that lava? Mako asked as they neared the peak of the volcano. Where? Oh, Bolin said. Is it erupting? He asked. I hope not, Mako said. No, I don't think so. Look, there isn't much of it, and it's not coming from the crater. And you're sure volcanoes don't do that? Reasonably sure, Mako said, but he sounded less than certain. Wait, what's that? There were bursts of bright lights all across the mountain top. Flashes of fire between the flows of lava. Was that? Yes. Korra. She did not look her best. Whenever Korra had fought or participated in pro bending, she had almost danced as she moved. The sight of her bending was always incredible, always almost a performance. She was not doing so here. Was the effort of manipulating other elements as well hampering her? No, that did not seem to explain the sluggish movements and how she was almost staggering. Wait. There was another fight nearby. Asami. Bolin blurted. She's here too. Mako asked. Yeah. Bolin pointed. Asami moved with blurred speed. He had seen moments of it when they confronted Shady Shin, but this was so different. Fingers jabbing towards weak spots, her opponent trying to get around her, striking at her clothing. Hang on, Mako said. I'm going to get us closer. The burst of flame attracted the earthbender's attention, and for a moment his gaze met Bolin's. Bolin picked up a large chunk of concrete. Korra needed help. And taking down that firebender shooting holes in the landscape seemed the best idea. Bit far away, but he had to try. He heaved the rock, almost unbalancing himself as it arced through the air towards her. Miss. Another. Almost, the third shot hit her. The firebender dropped to her knees, leaning forward onto her hands. Bolin felt for the next rock. There were few left. He had to make each count, and if nothing else keep the woman occupied. It took a moment before the blue glow penetrated his concentration. He blinked and looked to his brother. Mako. Mako did not reply, his teeth clenched tight. his hands moved in a similar way to Shady Shin's. Mako was lightning bending. "Bro," Bolin whispered in wonder. Mako grinned for a moment as the crackling energy reached a crescendo. With a push, Mako blasted a bolt down towards the firebender. The lightning crackled through the air and blasted into the ground. The ground exploded around the firebender, her ready collapsed figure hidden by the cloud of dust and smoke. Korra looked up along the path of the bolt. "Korra," Bolin yelled, waving. Wait. Was she getting closer? No, more like they were sinking. The balloon was losing altitude. "Mako," Bolin yelled. The smoke dissipated. The firebender woman was still there, still in the same position but not starting to move. She should at least be easier to hit now. Bolin hurled another rock. I know, Mako said as he turned and blasted another jet of flame into the balloon. "No, don't worry about that, attack. I will once I'm sure we're not going to come down in the lava," Mako muttered. Quickly, Bolin gestured. Mako shook his head. "She's too close to them. I can't try now, I might hit her." As he spoke, the firebender backed away from the struggling Korra and the earthbender. "Now," Mako said. The bolt erupted from his hand and struck the ground, once more hiding Korra's attacker from view. There was a curious popping from somewhere below. Bolin's eyes widened as he finally placed the sound. Before he could say another word, a bolt of fire shot up out of the smoke and scythed through the bottom of the gondola. Bolin blinked. Mako was gone, the place he had been sitting now cut from the balloon. "Mako!" Bolin screamed as the fabric in the balloon above tore. He caught sight of Mako catching himself on a jet of flame just above the ground. It was not quite enough and he fell awkwardly onto the slope, sliding down the mountainside and into the tree line. Bolin felt relief for a moment. What now? Bolin hefted another rock before he smelt the smoke. The balloon was on fire. Asami surveyed the results of her collision. The non-bender, Zahir, was still going. He got to his feet, wincing but still mobile. With a sigh of frustration she revved the engine and accelerated towards him. He staggered to one side, trying to evade her, nothing she could not keep up with. She aimed right for him and somehow missed. There was a second of confusion and then his hand was around her throat. Asami tried to yell in surprise but she fell backwards as he squeezed. The fall was less painful than expected, the armor lived up to its name. Zahir knelt upright, pinning her under him. With a grunt of exertion he jabbed his fingers down hard onto her nearest chi point. He looked pleased with himself, pulling his arm back ready to strike again. "Not this time," Asami said with a grin. She punched his face with the arm he thought he had disabled. Zahir croaked in pain, hands shielding his face. She used the moment to jab her knee into his back. Asami twisted her body around, throwing Zahir off her as she scrambled to her feet. Zahir looked furious as he faced her, his hands tensed and ready. "So, you are not as helpless as you seem." His lip and nose were bleeding, blood running down his face. He seemed to take no notice of it. Asami waited for his attack, tension filling every limb, every impulse screaming at her to attack. Explosions rocked the mountainside and worry gnawed at her. Was the standoff just a delaying tactic? Time to take the initiative. Asami lunged forward, aiming for the chi point on Zahir's neck. He blocked her jab and twisted away from her as she tried to trip him. Okay. So not going to be easy. Another feint and then a jab at his right arm. He sidestepped the blow, his own fingers jabbing the small of her back for a moment as she spun around to face him again. Asami grunted, the blow was painful even if he could not block her chi. Neither one of them had hindered the other yet. But he was faster, more agile than her. Her single good blow had been a matter of circumstance, Zahir seemed far too cautious now. She needed a lucky hit or for him to make a mistake. Anything. She darted forward and tried to sweep his legs out from under him. He dodged the attack, his fingers coming down hard onto her shoulder. Still not rendering her immobile, but she could not afford to let him take hold of her like that. She jerked backwards and fell onto her back. Asami kicked out, forcing Zahir to dodge back. She took the opportunity to push herself back onto her feet, ready once more. Stalemate. Zahir chuckled to himself. You are truly a capable opponent. Miss Sato, he said as he withdrew a knife. But this is growing tiresome. It has not been a good day for me and I wish to end this now. Now that changed things somewhat. The armor might turn away jabbing fingers, but there would be little it could do against blades. Was that possible? Something that could turn away a knife like that? Not now, Asami. Save that for later. So, self-defense. Opponent with a weapon, give up your belongings. If that was not what they were after, run and yell fire. And if there is no escape, fight to the death. Going to be option 3 here. It was not as if she was completely helpless. Kali training was one of the many things her father had insisted upon. But there was an ocean of difference between sparring and fighting. Especially against an opponent who would more than likely disregard the rules as it suited him. Zahir lunged for her and she dove away from him. Not fast enough. Her side burned with a sharp pain that intensified with each second. It was low down, just above her hip. Nothing too vital there, but now she probably had blood loss to worry about. Asami lashed out, inelegant, angry, the movement causing her side to sting. Zahir ducked away from her fist. She stumbled, the slope offered poor footing. Asami pressed her arm against the wound, trying to ignore the pain even as it threatened to overwhelm her. Zahir stalked forward as her feet slid a little further down the slope and she swayed, trying to keep her balance. One chance. One attempt. All or nothing now. She pushed herself forward and ducked her head, running right at him. His chin cracked into the top of her head, the pain leaving her dizzy and her vision blurred. She lost her balance, but managed to grab at his leg as she stumbled. Asami tripped him over as she hit the ground hard. Okay. Legs up and around his arm. Her side exploded with a new pulse of pain and she gritted her teeth as she twisted. Zahir shrieked as the crack of breaking bone echoed in the night air. Disengage. That should render him more or less useless for now. Time to get away. Awkward to stand with one hand, but she managed somehow. A hand grabbed her foot and she tumbled back to the ground, the movement knocking the air out of her. A new blossomed pain in her chest and pain shot through her. There was a sting that was nothing more than a precursor to a worse pain that seemed to be forever on the verge of breaking over her for eternity. Blissful moments of nothing as she felt the pain as something other and distant. It was upon her all too soon. The agony was like nothing she had felt before. Her eyes clenched tight shut, her jaw yawning wide, but she could not hear anything. The pain made her want to scream, but she fought the impulse, the movements of her chest just worsening the pain. Her throat felt choked. There was a knife nearby. Was that blood? Was that her blood? So much pain. Zahir further away, distant and untouchable, smiling. He said something, whatever it was, inaudible over the roar in her ears. Something tugged at her good arm. How long since she last took a breath? Too long. Her lungs are burning, her mouth is hanging open, useless. Her mouth quivered in silent agony as her eyes flooded with tears. How much longer could she have? She needs air. Someone calling her. Mako? Asami. Warmth on her hand. Another voice. Her name. Asami. The dizziness intensifies, her lungs burn and ache. As she strained to breath, the pain racked her once more. Her arms felt numb, her whole body dissolving into pins and needles. Darkness. It was dark before, but it seemed to be getting darker still. Is the magma extinguished? But then where are the stars? Peely darted in front of Korra as she flicked the water tentacle at Zahir. The water evaporated in a moment as the firebender blocked her attack. She looked grim in the red glow of the magma. Bolin's missiles had stopped and Korra tried to keep Peely in sight as she figured out where Gazan was. Not far away. Peely tensed and directed a new bolt at Korra's feet. She bounced backwards as the ground exploded, forced to change direction immediately to avoid a magma stream. On reflex she stamped down, punching the ground up under Gazan's feet. He panicked as he flew forwards, landing close to her. Korra glanced around. Not good. They were on a small island surrounded on all sides by lava. Gazan struggled to his feet. Korra, he began. Save it, she snapped. I'm not playing your games anymore. Her back was to Pili. Not good. Did none of it mean anything to you? He asked. Korra paused, mulling over how to respond. No. This was just another attempt to bring her on side. She shook her head. Not anymore, she said. Gazan stared over her shoulder and the hairs on the back of Korra's neck stood on end. She tensed, not wanting to take her eyes off Gazan, but also waiting, fearing to hear the telltale series of pops. Or would she? That attack was not the only tool Pili could turn on her. She scowled. Somehow she needed to get Gazan turned around so she could look at both her opponents. There was a loud crack, a flicker of light and a grunt behind her. Gazan stared past her in shock. What had happened? The temptation to look around was overwhelming now, but it could still be a trick. No pops even now. No wall of flame to immolate her. She needed to be fast. Gazan was shifting his stances, the nearby magma starting to swirl and shift in response to his movements. A wave of heat washed over her. He was drawing the magma towards her. Korra ducked to the ground, her fingers jamming into the mountainside and pushing with all her might. The ground shifted under Gazan's feet and encased him in a cone of rock. It lasted little more than a second as he burst free. Unsurprising. It was all she had though, not enough water to pin him down at this rate. Wait. Something was wrong. The lava was still surging and moving. The ground cracked beneath Gazan's foot and he stumbled, falling down onto one knee as the lava continued on under inertia. Korra panicked as the wave rushed towards him. She tried to pull the lava back, but lava bending remained beyond her. The lava still trapping Gazan on an even smaller fragment of land. He breathed a sigh of relief, barely able to shout as the ground beneath him shifted again and he plunged into the lava stream. His shriek of pain as the magma enveloped him echoed for a moment and was silenced, but even that was too long. Korra turned away, not wanting to see the end results, concerned about what he had seen and what had befallen Pili. The firebender was struggling to get back to her feet. She had been lying in a depression in the mountainside, one that lava was now sluggishly flowing back into. Gazan had been trying to save her. Pili finally pushed herself upright and staggered backwards away from the magma. She glared at Korra, her body tensing, her head thrust forward. She was going to attack. She could try and trap her like she had with Gazan, but would she make it in time? A stray movement. A falling rock. One chance. Pili hissed as her frown deepened and Korra pushed the rock towards the firebender's head with as much force as she could muster. The crack of the impact was shockingly loud and Pili's body crumpled to the ground in an instant. Korra tensed, watching in case she got back up. Moment after moment passed. She seemed to be unconscious for now. Wait. Was she even still breathing? Korra, a voice growled. Zahir was stalking towards her, his face twisted into an ugly scowl. He looked past her, at the felled form of Pili, his hands clenching and unclenching. Blood splattered the front of his tunic and he was covered in cuts and bruises. His left arm was held against his side. Where was Asami? Zahir's hands pawed at his belt, seemingly unable to find what they were looking for. Lost your weapons? Korra asked. Not quite all of them, Zahir answered, his voice low. He raised his good hand. Korra recognized the stance and form of his hand, he was going to chi-block her. She swallowed. Could she hope to defend herself even now? Not once had she won in hand-to-hand combat with him. Though it had been different back then. Zahir insisted on fair fights, no bending allowed on her part. The situation did not seem to call for fairness. Are you sure you want to try? Korra asked even as she took a step back to keep her distance from him. I could stop you right now. You could, Zahir agreed. But would it mean the same? To utterly defeat me, a man who cannot bend, who must rely only on his own skill. Oh, the stories they will tell of Avatar Korra and how she defeated the Red Lotus. Of how she defeated an unarmed, non-bender. Korra scowled. I can defeat you without bending, she said, relaxing her stance. Can you? Zahir said even as he tried not to stare at something past her. Pili. Was she awake again? I'm not the same anymore, Zahir. I've had training. In a sport, he replied, every word dripping with contempt. I have friends. Whom you lied to. About so much, Korra, Zahir said, his eyes narrowed. Do you really think they will be your friends even now? When they know just what you are and what you hid? Yes, she said, forcing her voice not to quaver. They're better than I am. Zahir snorted. Blind faith. And how utterly pathetic. The great avatar reliant on her friends. Friends who care about others. You keep telling me about corruption, but Asami did everything to help Mako and Bolin. Korra glared at him as he snorted. I wouldn't the first anyway. Aang had friends. He trusted them. Aang was weak. He was a poor avatar and a poorer airbender. I never wanted you to compare yourself to him. Zahir blinked. You were supposed to be better. You turned out just like him. That shouldn't be a surprise, Korra murmured. What was that? Korra shook her head. Nothing. Nothing. If he did not know, she saw no reason to tell him that secret. The one that warmed her whenever she remembered it. So, Avatar. Do you still wish to fight me unarmed? Even though. Zahir chuckled. Korra felt a shiver run down her spine. What is it? Zahir shook his head. If you should defeat me. I want to leave you one final surprise. Or perhaps you could beat it out of me. He smiled, his expression smug. Korra saw red. She darted forward, aiming a blow at the chi point on his shoulder. He blocked it, but the smug expression evaporated. She grinned. He was slower than she remembered. She spun away from his jab to her side and cartwheeled away from him, catching his chin with her foot. He stumbled, lashing out, his movements sloppier than she remembered. She closed the distance, feinted to the left and then jabbed right. A hit. Zahir's right arm flopped uselessly to his side. Korra blinked in disbelief. She had done it. For the first time, she had landed a hit on him. She was better than him. He evaded her now, he had no means of counter-attacking. She was faster. 2 quick jabs and he collapsed beside Peely. The scream startled her. Above her the balloon's gondola held only Bolin and it along with the balloon itself was on fire. A panicked Bolin tugged at various ropes strewn along the balloon. With a wild look in his eyes he rolled over the side of the gondola. There was no way he would survive the fall. Bolin, she yelled as she leapt upwards. Too slow. The wind she could marshal was too weak. She could not possibly reach him in time with such imperfect control over the element. She had to make it. Bolin must not die. Something shifted inside her and the world blurred as she accelerated. The wind against her back became a gale, the force against her back almost unbearable, but she endured as she shot upwards. In the blink of an eye had she reached Bolin. Korra wrapped her arms around him and hugged him close. Bolin hugged back for dear life. He was safe. The same shift came again and the wind faded to nothing. The wind was no longer there to support her. Bolin and Korra plummeted together, the ground rushing up to meet them. But it was survivable this time. Still painful as they fell onto the mountainside, but no longer life-threatening. There was a crack of lightning in the distance and then silence. Korra blinked her eyes open cautiously. She found herself straddling her friend, her hands resting on his chest, her knees hard against the rocky ground. Oof, she said, breaking into a grin. Bolin's face remained scrunched up. Pain? Fear? He should be fine now. Korra. He gasped. I think my ribs are broken. He winced. Korra giggled. No, I think that's my fault. Huh. Korra sat back and Bolin inhaled in relief. He opened his eyes a crack, and they widened in an instant as his gaze met hers. Hi, she said. Korra, he yelled, sitting up awkwardly, almost tipping her backward as she slid into his lap. You're okay. He wrapped his arms around her and squeezed. Oh, I was so worried. So was I, Korra said as she returned the hug. Try not to do that again, I might not be there next time. Oh. She pulled back. Were you with my parents? We were, Bolin exclaimed as he grinned. They're fine and dash. Korra, a voice yelled. Korra looked around to see Mako scrambling towards her looking pale. Korra, Asami is. He trailed off. Bolin. You're okay. Mako shook his head. No time, Korra, quick. Asami's in trouble. Korra leapt off of Bolin and raced after Mako as he ran back up the mountain, Bolin sprinting after her. The ground around Asami was dark with blood. Asami, Korra cried, falling to her knees and grabbing her hand. Asami's eyes blinked open. Korra, she whispered, her voice quavering as she gasped, her chest barely moving. We need to get her help, Korra said. That'll take too long, Mako replied with a frown. Can we do anything? Korra said, glancing around the mountainside in a panic. Can you? Do you know any healing? Mako asked. I mean you're a waterbender and all, and... Korra worried her lip with her teeth. I don't know. No time for that. I'm going to try. No. She smiled grimly. I'm going to save her. The water she took from Ming was long gone, but there was at least some moisture in the air. Panic made it hard to draw the moisture into her hands, the droplets taking too long to accumulate. How much did she need? No time for second-guessing this. She would heal Asami with what she had. It will be enough. 2 injuries. The chest wound was probably the more severe. She would start there. The water dripped from her hands and soaked into the bloody mess of Asami's clothing and towards the wound. Korra closed her eyes and pressed her hand down, focusing on healing. Mend the skin. Stop the bleeding. Heal. Just heal. A flicker of light in front of her. The water was responding. Something was flowing from her and into the water, into Asami. But there was not enough water for a wound of that severity. As much as she insisted to herself it would work, the wound refused to heal. More water, she gasped as she focused everything into the wound. I'll get more, Mako said as he scrambled to his feet. Beside her Bolin took Asami's hand. Korra, Asami gasped. My dad. Tell him. No. Korra shook her head and opened her eyes. Don't say that. Tears pricked at her eyes. Don't even think that. I'm going to save you. Korra. Asami wheezed, her lips quirking into a smile as her eyes closed. Asami, Bolin yelled. It was like a fire deep inside her. A burst of energy, a wave of dizziness, and she knew everything. There was water here. Water all around her. More than enough. Enough to heal the most mortal injury. But time was against her. Korra was not sure if she could take her hands from the wound, but in the moment that followed she knew she did not have to. The air cooled above her and grew foggy. She began drawing more and more water out of the chilled air, focusing it all into the same point in the space above Asami. The droplets swelled and expanded, forming a heavy sphere of floating water. Korra's eyes closed and she pulled the water down onto Asami. The sphere was still fed from the chilled air, but a torrent of water trailed from the bottom and onto Asami. Into the chest wound, into the wound at her side. The energy pulsed inside her again and she gasped, almost moaning as a burst of warmth ripped through her and into the water. There was a near blinding light beyond her eyelids, but she cannot take even a moment to look at it. This is too important. Asami gasped, and Korra almost laughed. Her friend coughed and drew in a deep breath. Asami stared up at her as Korra opened her eyes. Asami? She asked. Korra, Asami croaked and fell silent as she gulped at the air. I feel better, she said after a moment before taking a few more gasping breaths. With a groan she wrenched herself upright. Wow, she said. You are really something, she murmured and seemed to fall forward. Korra reached out to catch her, relieved when Asami's arms slipped around her shoulders and her friends pressed against her chest. Thank you. Korra tightened her embrace. Mako, Bolin yelled. You can come back now. Asami's fine. Mako charged towards them and skidded to a halt. You're okay. Asami twisted her head towards him slightly and nodded. Okay. Now everything's fine, I have to ask. Just where were you going to get water from? Bolin asked. Well, I figured maybe in the fog dash. His eyes widened. Wait, where's Zahir? And that waterbender? Mako scanned their darkened surroundings. I scared him off of Asami, but I lost track of him after. Korra tensed and gently pushed Asami away as she got to her feet. Bolin, look after Asami. Zahir could not be much of a threat. Not anymore. You see anyone other than us, attack or get both of you away from here. The mountain was quiet, the magma streams slowly cooling in the night air. Korra felt an odd sensation in her stomach as they darted across the bare mountainside. They found Ming unconscious not far from a lava stream. Not far from where Gazan met his end. She could not bear to look at the spot the lava had flown over the Red Lotus member. Peely's body was lay nearby, she had not moved. Korra stopped. Someone was sitting slumped beside her. Zahir stared down at his companion, his expression unreadable in the darkness. One of his arms hung limply against his side. He did not move or give any sign he knew she was there. There was a flicker of light nearby. Mako had formed a fire dagger. Mako, no. Korra shook her head and took a few steps towards her former teacher. A cloth covered Peely's face. Some dignity for the dead at least. Zahir, she said. He ignored her. You taught me a lot, she continued. About the world. About how it was okay to kill to accomplish something. But. She glanced down at her hands. I don't think I would like doing that. And. She trailed off, choosing her words carefully. I think I understand you now. I think I understand freedom in a way I didn't before. But not in the way you might like. I can only see it thanks to the distance. That is, the distance from you. And it's better here, away from you. Like I said, I can't go back with you. So, goodbye, Zahir. She turned away. Korra, Mako snarled. You can't just leave him. Not after all he's done. Korra shook her head. No. Then at least tie him up and give him to the police. No. Why not? Korra sighed. He's nothing without his friends now. She glanced back. Zahir had still not moved a muscle. Besides, he can't move. I blocked his chi. It would be easy to take revenge now, but the thought left a bad taste in her mouth. She continued walking away from the man and his fallen companion. A few steps later her knees buckled, her head fuzzy. Korra? Mako asked, his hand on her shoulder. She had rejected her teachers. They no longer had any bearing on her life. She no longer had any love for any of them. There were people so much more deserving of love. Dizziness washed over her, the world spinning under her feet, and she could no longer tell which way was up. Korra fell and never hit the ground, the world swirling and darkening around her. No anger. No grief. No happiness. Just void. Void and calm. A strange peace. Korra let go and the world faded away. Book 1, Healing. Chapter 19, Freedom. Korra. Her eyes snapped open. She was lying on the ground. Mako rushed up and crouched beside her. Are you okay? He asked, peering down at her. Her body felt numb. She nodded slowly, her cheek scraping against the rough rock beneath her. Okay. Mako frowned. You must have tripped. Let's get you back to Asami and Bolin. She nodded again and let Mako help her into a sitting position and then haul her up onto her feet. What was wrong? There felt like a vast distance between herself and Mako, herself and the mountain. Mako held onto her arm and as he stepped forward she stepped with him. It was simple to fall into the rhythm he set, one foot after another, just walking forward. Not seeing anything. Not really even feeling the touch of Mako's hand. The hard surface beneath each footstep barely registered. She did not think she would have been able to remain upright without his support. Korra, a distant voice called. Nearly there, Mako said. Korra, Bolin repeated as he approached them. Everything okay? He looked wearily past her. Yeah. Everything's fine. Right, Korra. Mako said. Korra nodded and Bolin smiled. So it's all sorted and you can come back with us again. She nodded again and he stepped forward, throwing his arms around her. He was warm. So warm. She pulled a little away and smiled at him, her mouth feeling awkward. Yeah. I'm back, she said. I think we need to get Asami to a hospital, Mako said quietly. Hospital? Yeah, Korra said, stepping away from Bolin. Well, okay, she might be fine with a clinic. Depends how much you healed her. In any case. Mako trailed off and smiled. Hey, how about you two make us a path back to the city? It'll be a long hike if we try to walk. You want us to both earthbend? Bolin asked. Sure, Mako replied. You're an earthbender, and Korra's the Avatar, right? Avatar, Korra murmured. I am. She looked over to Asami. We'll do it. Together. She trudged further up the slope, headed straight for Asami, the other two just behind her. Her head was beginning to clear, the feeling of distance reduced as she walked. Everything okay? Asami asked. Korra nodded. Yeah. Over. She sighed. Asami looked at her quizzically and tried to reach out. She grimaced and let her hand drop. We'll get you help, Korra said, the words coming easier with each breath. If Korra and I are bending, then maybe Mako should carry Asami. Bolin said. No, Asami said sharply, and coughed a moment later. I mean. She wheezed. No, thank you. I'll be okay. Are you sure? Korra asked, still feeling fuzzy. Asami nodded. I trust you, she said between panting breaths. Make sure you stay close, Korra said as she helped Asami to her feet. I will, she replied through clenched teeth, wincing as she stood upright. Okay, so, how about I give us something to stand on and Korra, you prepare the route? Bolin asked. Sure, Korra said, staring down the mountain. It should be trivial to keep the route clear and control the speed of their descent. This would be easy. No problem at all for the Avatar. Bolin stamped into the ground, forcing a roughly rectangular section of rock up out of the mountain. All aboard the Avatar line's non-stop service to Republic City, Bolin called. Asami smirked, Mako rolled his eyes and Korra forced her lips into a smile. After a flourish from Bolin, Korra concentrated and sent them in motion. She bent the ground just ahead of the slab in a constant stream of tiny manipulations. Korra smoothed the rocky surface, detouring them around the odd tree and any other obstacles. Republic City rushed up to them as they schemed downwards. Korra's mind drifted as they moved, the bending rote and perfunctory, nothing she needed to concentrate on. Her friends were still with her. Despite trying to leave them behind, despite telling them not to get involved, they had all been there, in danger. They could have so easily died. Just like Gazan. Like Pili. Like Ming. I'm sorry, she murmured, just audible over the grinding rock beneath them. Huh? Bolin asked. I'm sorry I lied to you all. About being the Avatar? Mako asked. Korra nodded. Yeah. I didn't have to, but it's one of the things the Red Lotus was constantly telling me not to let anyone know. They had me convinced the world would be against me. It was hard to risk trusting anyone. She smiled bitterly. Guess I'm just a coward. No, Asami gasped. Not at all. But you were all in danger because of me. Korra, I know we only met them tonight, but it was obvious they weren't good people. They killed Yujin. Bolin swallowed and continued hurriedly. They tried to kill you. It's... They took you when you were just a child, right? He asked. Korra nodded. So they raised you to think like them. Another nod. How can you blame yourself then? Pretty hard to think otherwise like that. But... Korra trailed off, frowning. I was worried things wouldn't be the same if you knew I was the Avatar. I've been so happy here, living with you, she smiled at Asami, who smiled back. And pro-bending with you. She smiled at Bolin. Korra, really? You're our friend first. I wouldn't care if it turned out we're a spirit possessing a woman's body. Bolin blinked. You aren't right. Korra tried to bite back a smile as she shook her head. Well, anyway. Doesn't matter that you are the Avatar. Things aren't going to change between us. Well, unless you really wanted them to. I don't, Korra said quickly. Bolin scratched at his head. Actually, I think things will change. Korra's heart sank. They'll be better. Bolin beamed at her. Better. Yup. Bolin nodded. You don't have to be afraid anymore. The Red Lotus is all gone and we know your secret. Korra's smile faded. But I could have still resisted them. I could have told you sooner. I could have gone to Tenzin and maybe you wouldn't have all been in danger. Korra, Asami reached out, her hand soft against her own. Their fingers laced together. Please don't blame yourself. I'm sorry as well. I could have tried to tell people where you were. I could have stopped everything even sooner. She wheezed and squeezed her hand. Korra stared at her. But you're... She gestured. Injured because of me. We almost lost you back there. Asami wheezed deeply. Would have hurt me more if you never came back. Worth it. Her smile was dazzling and the distance closed a little more. Plus, Bolin added. If anyone takes you away then the three of us will not stop until we got you back. We'd search all four corners of the world for you. Right, Asami agreed. Hey, what's that? Mako interrupted and frowned, staring at something further down the mountain. Korra, stop us. Korra reached out and their descent came to a grinding halt. Okay, so, it looks like there's two cops, metal benders, fighting some other people. Are they Red Lotus too? Bolin asked. Korra peered forward, a chill gripping her stomach. Yeah, they're some of Dash. The name made her pause but she forced herself to say it. Zahir's helpers. One of the metal benders had crumpled to the ground. We should help Dash. Bolin's eyes widened as the other fought off both her attackers without a problem. Okay, so, maybe not. Damn, she's good. That is some seriously impressive metal bending. In a matter of moments two members of the Red Lotus were on ground unconscious, their arms bound tight behind their backs. The metal bender standing over them looked distinctly familiar. Korra's stomach twisted. The girl, she had been in the mansion with her. She had chased her onto the streets and cornered her. The metal bender stared at them each in turn, her body tense, but she made no move towards them. Avatar Korra? She asked, her voice stern, her face impassive. Why Dash, I Dash, you Dash dot. Korra swallowed. Please do not worry Avatar Korra. I am here to help you. Her expression softened. So, please don't run away this time. Korra felt herself tense and willed herself to relax. I'm not going anywhere, Korra replied. The metal bender stared at her for a moment longer and crouched down, murmuring something to her companion. Korra stepped down from the rock slab, nerves tense. The cop ran her fingers across her companion's body. A few broken bones, going to need more than one healer. She sighed and glanced up at Korra. This is once again not the best circumstances for us to meet, but... She smiled. I am honored to meet you Avatar Korra. My name is Kuvira. Korra blinked, trying to work out what to say in reply. No. Remain pragmatic. Asami and this cop needed a hospital. Where's the nearest hospital? She blurted. Kuvira frowned. Nothing near here. It'll be fine though, none of her injuries are life-threatening. I'll call in some assistance. She turned away from Korra and spoke rapidly into a radio. Come in, Chief. Over. Lin here, a voice crackled from the radio. What's happening? Over. Kuvira turned, caught Korra's eye and smiled. I'm going to need some help. I have an officer down Dash. And a civilian, Korra broke in. And a civilian, Kuvira corrected. We're on Chinktai, about a mile from the foot of the mountain. 30 degrees from east to the north. Over. Coordinates confirmed. We'll get someone over to you real quick. Over. Might want to tag along, Kuvira said. I have the Avatar and her friends too. Over. Kuvira was grinning. There was a sharp sound from the radio and some fumbling scratches. She's there. The radio squawked. There was a pause. Over, the voice added. She is, Kuvira said. I suspect we'll see you soon. Out. We'll be there. Out. Kuvira holstered her radio. You said a civilian injury? She asked. Korra nodded. Yeah. Asami. Asami gingerly stepped down from the slab, panting with each step. Kuvira frowned. What happened? Stabbed, Korra said. Stabbed? Kuvira echoed. And you're walking around? She exclaimed. Where? Asami gestured to her stomach. Kuvira pulled her clothing away roughly and frowned. Are you sure you were stabbed? This just looks like a real nasty cut. Korra, healed. Asami said with difficulty. Amazing. Though, doesn't sound like you're quite right. She glanced around Asami. And you too, are you both? She trailed off, her eyes widening as she saw Mako. He reacted in kind and both looked away from the other. Do you two know each other? Bolin asked, pointing at each in turn. No, Kuvira said as turned back to Asami. That's still painful though. Asami nodded. Side 2, she said. Kuvira tugged at Asami's shirt again. Ah. This one looks a bit nastier. We'll get you patched up all the same. Kuvira turned and marched a little further down the mountain. They should be on their way any minute. She pulled 2 sticks from her belt and bent them until they cracked. As the ends began to splutter and glow with an increasingly intense light, Kuvira held them aloft and waved them. Thick smoke boiled off the unusually colored ends. Korra stared past Kuvira, eventually catching sight of the airborne lights heading towards them. Kuvira kept waving the signals until the vessels neared. The roar of the airship's rotors drowned out any further conversation, and a beam of light from the lead ship split the darkness. It caught Korra in its glare and she shielded her eyes with her hand, trying to stare up at the airship. After another moment the light dimmed slightly and swept across the others before winking out. Worry curled inside her and she found herself tensing and getting ready to run. Korra! Korra, it's okay. Mako shouted hurriedly over the noise. They're not here to arrest you. He did not sound as certain as she would like. He pointed. That ship at the front. That's the police. The others? United Forces vessels. They'll have someone who can help Asami, or if nothing else get her to a hospital fast. It's going to be okay, Asami said as she clasped Korra's hand. Korra squeezed back. Something else moved between the airships. An air bison, this one without dyed fur. It glided to the ground and Tenzin scrambled from its back. You're okay, he shouted over the roar as the airship crept closer to the ground. Mostly, Korra yelled back. There was an extra blast of wind and the engine quietened. For a moment nothing happened, the other airships maneuvering to get closer to the mountainside. A hatch pushed open on the lead ship and 2 people scrambled out onto. Both wore traditional water tribe clothes. Both were somehow familiar. Korra was moving before she realized. Asami, Bolin, Mako, Kuvira, Tenzin, all left behind as she ran. Korra. The woman asked as she stepped forward. Korra remembered that voice. It had scolded her many times before, been the voice of absolute authority. But it had also sung her lullabies and cared for when Korra was ill. She dithered a footstep away from the woman whose eyes were welling up with tears and then threw herself forward. She hugged as tight as she dared, feeling her mother's arms circle around her as she sobbed. Her legs gave out again, her mother moving with her until they were on the ground together, curled around each other. A new touch on her back, an additional warmth, and another body beside them. A touch on her hair, a kiss on the top of her head. A voice overwhelmed with emotion. Korra, her father choked out. Korra, her mother echoed and Korra wailed, clasping tighter. Sobs racked her whole body, but each touch on her back, her hair, made her feel a little better. Each little coo and shush from her mother lessened the pain a little more. After so long. After never believing she could ever see them again, her parents were right beside her. "My beautiful daughter," her mother said. Korra looked up. Her mother smiled back at her, and doing anything more than staring back was beyond her. The distance was gone. Korra smiled. "Mom. Dad." The words were shaky, long out of practice, but the effect on her and her parents was electric. Her mother drew her forward into a new embrace. We're. "Korra, I'm sorry we weren't able to rescue you," her father said, his voice soft. Korra turned to him, shaking her head. "No. No. You can't apologize. Dad." Korra gulped. "If I'd known you were still alive, I'd. A new wave of sorrow swept over her and she pressed her head against her mother's shoulder. "We can't get the lost time back, Korra. But we can be a family again. All of us together," she said. Korra smiled. A family. Her family. It was larger again. Asami and Bolin and Mako and Tenzin and Pema and Jinora and Ikki and Milo and Mom and Dad. There was a buzz of conversation nearby, almost lost beneath the idling engines. Men and women in uniforms kept throwing glances in her direction, all them tense and nervous. The few who met her gaze immediately looked away, finding interest in anything besides the Avatar. A group all dressed in white skirted around her, giving her and her family a wide berth. They headed for Asami, Bolin and Mako. "I'll be right back," her father said. With another kiss he headed for a metal bender with gray hair and a man in a red uniform. It took her a moment to place the metal bender. Korra tried not to panic. She was someone else Korra had tried to attack. There was a brief conversation, filled with gestures and shakes of head. Korra's heart sank. Then the metal bender threw her hands up in surrender and her face broke into a wry smile, one shared by both Tenzin and her father. "Korra," Asami called. She was lying on a stretcher headed, two people carrying her towards the airships. Korra pulled away from her mother and caught Asami's hand. "Where are they taking you?" "Hospital," Asami grinned, wincing slightly. "They're going to check me over and finish up what you started. Don't worry, I'll see you soon." She waved as the men carried her to the airship. "Hi again, Korra's mom," Bolin said behind her. "I told you, it's Senna," she replied. "Also." She grabbed Bolin's shoulders and threw her arms around him. "Thank you." She turned to Mako and embraced him as well. "If you two hadn't come, we would never be standing here." You saved my parents?" Korra asked. More tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you," she said as she hugged Mako and then Bolin. "Thank you." Bolin sniffed, rubbing at his eyes with one hand. "Don't mention it." His voice got a little higher. "Least we could do." Tenzin cleared his throat. "Korra, we have arranged some rooms for you and your parents on Air Temple Island. If you would like to take the time to rest and recuperate." A heavy weight seemed to roll across her as he spoke. So much had happened today and exhaustion seemed to be catching up with her. "Yes, please." "Very well," Tenzin said. "We'll take Oji." "What about my friends?" "We'll be fine," Bolin said hurriedly. "I think we could also do with a hospital trip, I mean, we did drown earlier." "I told you not to tell her that," Mako said sharply. "Drowned?" Korra asked worried. "Later," Mako said. "We'll tell you everything when we see you, later." Korra nodded reluctantly and let her father steer her up onto Oji. Her limbs felt heavy. Bolin waved goodbye as the air bison took to the sky, the effort of waving back almost too much. They flew into the night and when she glanced back all she could see was the dim outline of the mountain. She leaned against someone, her father probably, as her eyes grew heavier. He was comfortingly warm. Something soft lay across her shoulders and everything was warm and good. Korra smiled as she let sleep overwhelm her. At least the night had not been boring. Long, tiring, yes. But never boring. Kuvira sighed. It was not far to the dorms but there was still so much to do. Reuniting the Avatar with her parents. Getting her friends to hospital. Arresting members of the Red Lotus. contemplating what they needed to do about what remained of that mansion. The sheer volume of paperwork this was going to require. Kuvira sighed and rolled her head, trying to make her neck click. She idly wondered what reuniting with her own parents would be like. Somewhat different. Interesting, but with much less crying. More shouting. By the time dawn had broken, everyone was beginning to slow down, but they were at least on top of the situation. Kuvira wondered just who was going to shout at who over the state of the mountain. The jagged holes in the peak, the new lava flows that had taken a team of waterbenders most of the night to cool enough that they stopped flowing. Details, more meetings, more delays. Kuvira, a voice shouted from behind her. She rolled her eyes and walked away from the gathering mob of press at the base of the mountain, ignoring the attempt to engage her. Lin and Iroh were watching as the last few bodies were set down behind a screen well away from the press. 6 further members of the Red Lotus, besides the 2 she restrained. 2 more on Air Temple Island. 2 lost in the wreck off Fugu Island. Was that all of them? Difficult to tell. Kuvira blinked and peered at the bodies. No armless waterbender here. At least one left somewhere. Iroh glanced around as she approached. Kuvira, was it? Yes, sir, Kuvira said as she snapped to attention. Lin has led me to believe that you were responsible for finding Avatar Korra last night. He asked. Yes, sir. He smiled. At ease, Kuvira, at ease. Kuvira shifted her stance, her posture still stiff. On behalf of the United Forces, I thank you for everything you have done. She smiled. Just doing my duty, sir. She bowed, her movements stiff. No matter her personal opinions, it would be unwise to annoy the man who was both a prominent member of the Fire Nation and the head of the United Forces. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Yes, but if not. Iroh shook his head. At least the Red Lotus are no more. It might be a little premature for celebration, Lin said. By my count we're missing 4 we know of. Ah, you mean the ringleaders? Iroh said. We recovered Miss Hua alive earlier this morning, but her injuries were near fatal. She was not expected to survive the night. Gazan and Pili's bodies were also recovered. And Zahir? Lin asked. Iroh fidgeted. We have him. And he's still alive, but... Kuvira twitched. But... He's completely unresponsive. As far as we can tell, his spirit has left his body. It's just a shell now. I think I remember Tenzin saying something about that. Lin murmured. Is that the last of them? Kuvira asked. I would like to hope so, but... No. I think there are others. Though all the ringleaders are accounted for. At least the ones we knew about. Though that's what went wrong last time. Lin said. Iroh sighed. Quite. And because of that they got everywhere. There were at least 12 at the base and we lost 9 men in the conflict. Lin sighed. And we had 7 in the police. They took 3 extra officers with them. So many. And after all these years, Iroh murmured. I vaguely remember some of them. They came for me, many years ago. You were luckier than Korra, Lin noted. Yes, I cannot deny that. But then again, they didn't want the same thing from her, Iroh said darkly as he stared at the bodies in silence. And it seems like they had a lot of contingency plans. He smiled. Though I doubt they could have prepared for Katara's arrival. Lin chuckled. No. No, I don't think they would have been ready for that. She winked at Kuvira's confusion. She is, a force to be reckoned with when she's angry. I'll try to stay on her good side then, Kuvira said, blinking. Katara was Aang's widow, right? Lin and Iroh chuckled as they lapsed into silence again. Ah, just the person I wanted to see, a voice boomed from behind them. Well, people. Kuvira span around and blinked. 2 of you anyway. A surprisingly older man in a red uniform much like Iroh's was smirking. Unless Kuvira was mistaken, he was Aang's first son. He dropped the smile and saluted Iroh quickly. General Iroh, sir. Iroh nodded. Commander Bumi. At ease. Byumi, Lin smiled. Good to see you. Byumi slouched, any hint of military discipline evaporating. Of all the days the Red Lotus chose to come out of hiding, they would pick my leave day. Byumi sighed and stared at the row of corpses. He blinked and glanced at Kuvira. Oh ho, I do not believe I have had the pleasure, miss. Ah, Lin said. Commander Byumi, this is Kuvira. She's Suyin's apprentice from Zaofu. An honor to meet you, sir, Kuvira bowed. He replied in kind, but he stared at her with one squinted eye. How old are you, lass? He asked. Kuvira blinked and frowned. 17, sir. Byumi chuckled. So, any interest in the United Forces? You can join up next year, you know. We don't have a lot of metal benders. The Bafong sisters have a habit of scooping them up before we can get at them. Byumi, you're making me and Suyin sound like cult leaders, Lin said. Byumi chuckled. And you say you're not? Worshippers of the high metal, I tell you, he stage whispered to Kuvira conspiratorially. Lin rolled her eyes. Honestly. So what do you say, Kuvira? Byumi asked. Want to help us out? You'll be a rarity in the organization and you'll get a snazzy red uniform just like mine. And Iroa's. I had not given it much thought before, sir. And it's not as if I'm a citizen of Republic City. Byumi shook his head. The latter don't matter. As for the former, give it some thought. You could make a real career out of it. He coughed. Might have gotten a little sidetracked on the recruitment drive. Real reason I'm here is to pass a message on from my brother. He pulled a face. Honestly, why he can't just use a hawk for this I'll never know, he muttered. Iroh blinked. And the message is? Oh, Byumi said. Ah, yeah. In his capacity as councilman, Tenzin has requested that no one involved in this operation is to comment on or publicly discuss the Avatar's situation, he intoned with mock gravitas. Basically he wants to hide her away for now, he added. I'm not sure how easy that'll be, Lin said. The attack yesterday was not subtle. We're still not sure if anyone got a good picture of her. Plus the incident is too big to just cover up, Iroh added. Even if there was a suitable cover story, it would not take much for the usual cranks to draw attention to all this. He sighed. But, despite that, I will comply with the request. Korra should not be exposed to the public, at least not yet. This has not been an easy time for her. Wonder what the press will say if and when they do find out about her, Kuvira muttered. Byumi blinked and twisted one finger in his ear. Sorry girl, you'll need to speak up, he said, cupping his hand to his ear. Kuvira squirmed. It's just, some of the public have seen her before this when she was pro-bending. Just not as the Avatar. The Avatar was pro-bending. Byumi exclaimed. Now that must have been a sight. What, was she on a team all on her own? That might have given her away somewhat, don't you think? Lin said, smiling. Curse your logic, Lin, Byumi growled. She was the firebender, Kuvira added. Was she any good? Byumi asked. Kuvira blinked. Yeah. Yeah, she was pretty good. Is she going to keep playing? Byumi asked with a smile. Kuvira said. It's all up in the air, Byumi, Lin said. But I don't think we need to worry too much, I doubt they'd expect the Avatar to be on a sports team like that. Any case, we're agreeing to letting her rest up with her folks, remember? Well, until Tenzin's official statement. Byumi made an exaggerated show of checking around him. Between us, I'm glad he's handling this mess. Lot of people want to talk to the Avatar. He stood upright and saluted them again. Anyway, he boomed. Iroh, Lin, Kuvira, I'm off. We'll get together when Kia, Mom, and your grandfather arrive, Byumi. Until then. Before we talk to Mako, was it? Lin said, halting just before the cabin door. Kuvira nodded. It did not seem like she could get away from the man. Just want to check, Suyin went through seismic sense and the basic gist of lie detection, right? Kuvira nodded again. Yes, ma'am. Good. If this goes a little wrong, we need 2 witnesses, and like everything else in this mess, the fewer people we need to bring in the better. So, here we go. Lin pushed open the door. Mako looked up from the bunk he had bin lying on. "Hi," he said uncertainly, his body tensing as he saw them. "Hello, Mako. My name is Chief Bafong." She smiled. Mako smiled back, but ducked his head to focus on the floor the second his eyes met Kuvira's. "Hi, Chief," he said. Lin sighed. "My companion here is Kuvira. Let me get straight to the point, Mako. I have no doubt you are extremely tired. I also know you got yourself mixed up with Korra a while back thanks in part to Asami Sato's generosity. Don't tell me she didn't bribe you guys enough." Lin bristled and worked her jaw. "I am not concerned with your former arrest record right now, Mako." She leaned back against the cabin wall. "You did a lot of brave things last night. You helped Korra out, you helped rescue her parents. And as far as I can tell for the last few weeks you have been a model citizen. It's all more than balancing out all the petty stuff you did before. That's good. I guess." Mako had not reacted with much enthusiasm. He likely realized there was a sting in the tail. Lin had not mentioned the fighting pits. And right in front of her was someone who could link her right back to them. No. Remain calm. While all Lin's attention seemed fixed on Mako, it was not impossible she might also be sensing Kuvira's own reactions. "I had the chance to talk with one of the Red Lotus we captured alive. Specifically one of the pair from Air Temple Island." Mako's heart skipped a beat. Lin did not need her for this. Mako had visibly twitched as she spoke. He did not want this conversation topic. "Manu told us you tortured him. With lightning." Kuvira blinked, looking between the two of them. "A brutal method but rumored to be extremely effective. So very rare though." Mako sighed. Yeah, I did." He stared at Lin. "No point denying it, is there?" "There would be if it were untrue." Lin frowned. "You do know that the city classifies torture as a major felony? And given you're 18 that means a full adult trial." "I know." Mako's hands rubbed against each other. "I know. But we needed to know. We didn't know how long we had, we just needed answers. And quickly." Mako looked resigned. Lin glanced over at Kuvira. She felt it too. Mako was being painfully, earnestly honest. And how had he come across such a rare technique? There was something else there, some reason why he had never used it in their fight. Lin continued. "From what he told me, it did not seem like the first time you've done something like that. I worry about who else wound up on the receiving end before that." Mako ducked his head again. "It's not like I wanted to," he muttered. "I had no choice but to do it when they told me they needed it done. I'm away from that now, going straight." Lin sighed again. "Relax, kid. I'm not planning to sling you in jail, not least when you helped." She fidgeted. "Still, as useful as it wound up being, I am uncomfortable with the method." She shook her head. "Not that it's likely the Avatar be terribly happy if we did throw you in jail either. Is she still okay?" "As far as I know. I'm talking to Tenzin a little later to find out." She frowned. "Besides the point though. I like to believe in second chances, though don't for a second think I won't be keeping my eye on you. Your past is not going anywhere, I'm afraid. And it's likely too late, but I'm not sure you should even be a factor in the Avatar's life. Though I think that moment passed when the Red Lotus got hold of her. We just have to hope for the best now." Mako sighed. "Fine. But don't judge my brother based on me. I kept him away from everything. I won't go within 1 li of her if that's what it takes, but don't take it out on him." Lin watched him carefully for a moment. "That's up to her. Or her parents. I think it probably best they know how you found them. Either way, I'll be keeping an eye on you." Lin sighed. "Sorry to dump all this on you now, but sooner we get this sorted sooner things can get back to normal. As normal as things will with the Avatar around. Anyway, we'll leave you alone now." "Ma'am." "Kuvira." Lin frowned. This was not easy. I have some follow-up questions for Mako. If you don't mind.
No.
Lin frowned. Do you need me for this?
Kuvira shook her head.
No. I won't be long, she said. She waited until Lin's footsteps had faded into the distance. Mako chuckled before she could say a word. Never figured you for a cop. Never figured you would be friends with the Avatar, she retorted.
Yeah, well, me neither, he said, fidgeting.
The cabin fell silent. Why'd you do it? He asked.
What?
Fight.
Yeah.
Go somewhere like that and belt someone like me around. Mako asked.
Fun, I guess.
Kuvira blinked. Was it really that simple? Chance for something real. How about you?
The money, Mako said. How did that go?
You got caught and wait, when she said Miss Sato helped you. She bailed you out. Mako nodded.
Why?
Not quite sure myself. And things after that didn't go exactly great. All because of how I lost.
Kuvira sighed.
I'm sorry. Mako blinked at her. It's fine. You beat me fair and square. You could have still won.
What, with lightning?
Mako shook his head. If I pulled that kind of stunt then I wouldn't have gotten as far as jail. He smiled. I guess I should thank you. You actually did me a favor in the end. And Korra too. Kuvira was not sure what to say to that. She sighed. Thank you for at least talking to me, Mako. I hope things go well, she said as she headed for the door. Kuvira paused, one hand on the handle. Just between us, she said, looking away from him. I would have done the same in your position. She glanced back over her shoulder. I think it was necessary. Mako frowned at her as she turned away. Asami blinked awake. She was lying in an unfamiliar bed, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. White curtains surrounded her on all sides. The bed was soft, but at the same time oddly uncomfortable. There was a muted, distant roar in the distance. She fidgeted around, trying to get into a better position. Rolling one way tugged at the attached IV tube uncomfortably. Rolling the other forced her to assume an awkward pose to avoid lying on it. At least the armor was no longer confining her and she felt lighter. After long minutes of trying to get back to sleep and failing, the curtains at the foot of her bed split, revealing a nurse. She said with a smile. Good morning, Ms. Sato. How are you feeling today?
I'm okay, I guess,
she said as the nurse pushed the curtains along their rail and gathered them near the head of her bed. There was a window above her with bright sunlight streaming in through it. What time is it?
8:30 a.m., she replied.
Asami frowned. How long have I been asleep?
Not long.
A few hours now. Didn't expect you up so soon. The nurse halted beside her. Now, would you like your breakfast?
Not right now, thank you.
Maybe later, she smiled. Not hungry right now. The nurse nodded and bustled off. Asami cursed herself for not asking if she could leave or there was something to do, or how or where Korra was right now. Excuse me, Miss Sato. There was a stranger at the end of the bed. He sounded familiar somehow. May I speak with you? Sure, Asami said, struggling to sit a little more upright. Thank you. It is good to finally meet you in person. I am General Iroh of the United Forces. He bowed. Good morning. She bent forward as much as she was able to and blinked at him. Generals were usually older than this, were they not? Miss Sato, I am here to apologize for the delays in providing you and your companions with the requested aid last night. In addition, I wish to commend you all very strongly for your bravery and skill in combat. And with your assistance in the eventual defeat of the Red Lotus. Oh. Asami blinked. Thank you, she said uncertainly. I was just trying to help my friend. How is Korra? Korra and her family are on Air Temple Island. Neither she, nor your other companions have any serious injuries, Iroh said. He shifted his feet. Miss Sato, I am uncomfortably aware that you and your friends did far more for the Avatar last night than the United Forces or the White Lotus managed in the last 17 years. We owe you an enormous debt. Are the Red Lotus gone now? She asked, her hands curling into fists beneath the sheets. We believe there may be 1 or 2 members unaccounted for, but the known ringleaders are now all dead. The organization should not be able to continue. He sighed. That said, we once thought Aang defeated them and they finished themselves off all those years ago. We were wrong about that. I hope it is over, she said, still feeling tense. I think it's safe to say it is, Miss Sato. And we hope to never encounter this situation again. He glanced back the way he came. Your father is on board. He is currently being briefed on the situation. You will be able to see him shortly. Unless. He looked back at her. Unless you would rather rest for now. Asami shook her head. No. No, please, I'd like to see him. And get this over with. Thank you for speaking with me, General. My pleasure. He smiled. You are part of a very privileged group now, Miss Sato, you and your friends. There is to be no public announcement about either Korra or the Avatar at this time. Certain elements are asking questions about the Red Lotus's assault on Chief Unalaq last night, and Tenzin is trying to ensure Korra cannot be linked to the attack, or if that proves impossible, he is attempting to mitigate the circumstances. And so, I am sorry, Miss Sato. Sorry? She asked. Despite your heroism, no one can know. At least not yet. Asami smiled. That actually suits me for now. I'm just glad she's okay. Oh, sorry, a new voice said. Bolin was covering his eyes with his hand as he turned away from Asami. Bolin? What are you doing? Asami frowned. I just barged in here and hadn't thought you might not be dressed, Bolin stuttered. Asami glanced down. The hospital gown was near shapeless and covered everything. It's fine, Bolin. You can turn around. Are you sure? Yes, Asami said, trying not to sigh. Ah, General Iroh, Bolin squeaked. Sorry for interrupting. Iroh shook his head. It's fine. I was just about to take my leave anyway. Until later, Bolin, Ms. Sato. Iroh bowed and walked away. Bolin tried to salute, but he was gone before he got the right hand. Bolin, Asami said and smiled. Are you okay, Asami? He asked as he turned back to her. More or less. Need to rest up, but I should be okay. How are you? I'm okay, I guess, he replied, his gaze drifting away. Bolin. Is something wrong? And no. I mean, yes. I mean, maybe, Bolin sighed. I saw Chief Bafong and Kuvira talk to Mako for a long time. Asami frowned. They probably just wanted an official record of what he thought happened. So why didn't they ask me too? Bolin asked, eyes wide. Because. Asami replied. Okay, now that is strange. I know. And Mako has been hiding things, and it's the chief talking to him. If she's doing it, then it's gotta be pretty serious, right? What if he goes to jail for good this time? How much of his actions last night had been desperation? How much had he changed in the short time she had known him? How lost would Bolin be without his brother? Asami, I know you and Mako fought, and aren't on the best terms. To put it mildly. But right now he might need your help again. You've already done so much, but I don't know who else to ask. Asami was silent for a long moment. For Bolin at least. I'll do what I can, she said. Thanks. I thought if we got to court, I was thinking, wouldn't it help to tell them all about how we saved Korra's parents and dash? Bolin, Asami said. It's okay. We don't know he is in trouble. If he is, we'll do whatever we need to. She looked into his eyes. He needed cheering up. And don't forget, you helped rescue them too. Bolin blinked slowly and his face broke into a grin. I don't know how much help I was. I mean, I basically just drowned with Mako. Asami stared at him. You what? Bolin waved her protest away. Oh, it's fine. Senna fixed us right up. Bolin. I'm fine really. I suppose the only other thing I did was fall out of a balloon and throw some rocks around. Bolin. Asami tried again. But it was worth it to see Korra with her parents again, Bolin finished. Asami smiled. That it was. She put her hand on his shoulder. You both helped last night. And if Mako's in trouble, I promise I'll help him. Thanks. I feel kinda bad. I mean, I doubt I could ever pay you back, Bolin said. Asami shook her head. I'm your friend Bolin. You don't ever need to pay me back. Asami dash. A new voice interrupted him. Asami. Hiroshi rushed into the room, his eyes puffy and red. He pushed straight past Bolin and hugged her, crushing her in his arms. Bolin mouthed good luck behind him and retreated. Dad, Asami began. He pulled back. I was, more than a little surprised to get a call from the United Forces. And another one from the police. And this was before Chow arrived to tell me the mansion had been attacked and you had gone dash. Dad, I'm okay, Asami interrupted. I'm fine. And before you say anything, there was no way I could just sit at home. Korra, she's the Avatar, Dad. Did they tell you that? They did. He stared at her. But it is confusing, surely the Avatar shouldn't need help. Hiroshi said as he frowned. And did you really have to put yourself in danger like that? He stared plaintively at her. This Avatar needed help. She needed my help, Asami said. I knew it was dangerous. But things would have been worse if I hadn't done anything. Dad, I'm still here. I made it through. How much did he know of her injuries? Probably all of it sadly. That was not going to help. I'll be fine. I just need some rest. Rest. Yes, Hiroshi said slowly and kissed her brow. We'll take you home. He sighed. But I need to make it safe again first. No. Asami sighed. I just want to go home. Asami clicked the radio off in frustration. Somehow both of the mansion assaults were still news. The details became more and more vague as the press ran into problems with Tenzin's news blackout. Despite that, no one saw fit to mention Yujin or Yin in the broadcasts. One aggravating talk show host used the incident as a springboard to rant about the necessity of bending regulation. It was soon followed by observations from others of how it was just the latest incident in a long line of bending-related violence. Asami snorted. If only he knew what it had really been about. She stared over at the flowers. For a time her room had been like a garden. A decidedly unnatural one, Asami decided. So many flowers, separated from each other with wax paper. Was it really worth digging out the next card? Seeing another get well soon from someone else she knew only vaguely? Here a bunch from the police. There a bundle each from every one of the heirs and heiresses of her father's friends. Republic City Public Transit, from those old pen friends in the Fire Nation. Even a bunch from the United Forces. As more threatened to arrive the next day, she ordered Takeshi to start laying them on Yujin and Yin's graves. Minus the odd ones she took a liking to. And the few others with more specific meaning to her. The bouquet from Tenzin and his family she kept in her room, the note saved in her box of memoirs. That container was now almost filled to overflowing with ticket stubs and tiny mementos of the last 3 weeks. An extra letter had accompanied the flowers, one from Tonrik and Senna. It stung a little that there was nothing from Korra, no extra message scrawled at the bottom, or another sheet where she had said something. She took some solace in their thanks, their gratitude to her for being Korra's friend. The usual platitudes and get well soons. At the end was the one reference to Korra's well-being. Still recovering, the note said. Not really what she wanted to read. She wanted her well, yes. But she also wanted her here again. Was that now impossible? Could she hope that Korra would come back, that they might get back to life as it had been? Some hope, her family were back in her life. They could only stay in Republic City so long. Sooner or later they would go back to the South Pole. And more than likely take Korra with them. And that would be that. She would be right back to where she started. No friends. Oh, she could visit Bolin if she wanted. But she wanted her. Asami did not leave her room for 2 days. She was dozing fitfully on her bed on the 3rd day, half listening to the servants doing something outside. Be careful. I know. Dead for life if I break it and so on. Yeah, but it's not going to be fun like the radio drama. They won't expect you to drink tea, eat cake, or flirt for money or anything. I can dream, right? A moment of silence. Asami rolled over. Hey. Don't these flowers only grow on Ember Island? Not sure. A knock on the door. Miss Sato. Asami sighed. Yes. Can we come in? I suppose. She said, rolling over to face the door. The servants pushed the door open and entered holding a large vase filled with peonies. Asami stared. The flowers were all subtle shades of red, the effect was like a flame erupting from the container. The mixture of warm colors matched the rays of the morning sun filtering through the crack in the curtains. She blinked and sat up. The 2 servants seemed excited as they passed a sealed envelope to her. Frowning, Asami slit the flap and pulled out the thick sheet of paper inside. The Fire Nation will be eternally grateful for everything you did for the Avatar. I hope for your rapid recovery and I wish you to know you have earned my utmost respect in fighting for your friend. Yours, Prince Iroh. Prince Iroh, she read aloud. The servants stared at her. As in the Prince of the Fire Nation. Asami nodded slowly, rereading the text. That's the one. Wow, they breathed. Do you want these sent to Yujin's grave too? Asami stared at the flowers for a long moment. No, she said eventually. Can you put them on the sill please? The servants threw back the curtains and the flowers caught the sun's light. The petals glowed even warmer. Takeshi rushed into the room a moment later. Ms. Asami. I'm so very sorry, but this was left out of the employee bouquet. He was clutching a singular sunflower and a folded sheet of paper. Asami frowned. Let me see, please. The flower's base was in a glass bottle. If she twisted it around, she could see the word vinegar etched into the glass. She smiled and unfolded the note. In a shaky and uncertain hand, Bolin had wished her well, flattering her with his introduction. Mako was still free. Her heart sank a little at the knowledge the 2 of them wanted to visit. Bolin was fine, Mako less so. And he was still talking about Team Avatar. There was a paw print beside the messy, wobbling letters of Bolin's signature. Asami stared at the sunflower in its cheap container. Asami swung herself out of bed and retrieved the memento box. Both letters went in and a photograph came out. 4 people caught in a moment, her gaze drawn to the one who looked the most unsure, the most nervous. And the most beautiful. Right before everything changed. She wanted that moment back. Wanted that time all over again. But things would never quite be the same now. Mako's actions still ate away at the back of her mind. Korra, well, she must be happy now she has her parents back. Asami could not really expect her to leave them behind again and come back here. She should take solace in Korra being happy. At getting another chance at her family. And part of her was. But the other part wanted those nighttime conversations again. Being the one to drop Korra off for pro bending practice. The one to picking her up at the end of the day. Meals out. Shopping. Theater. Just messing around. Dinners. Breakfasts. The 2 of them together. Could she go visit? Would anyone want to see her? It was not hard to get to Air Temple Island. Tomorrow maybe. Tomorrow she would see about going to visit Korra. Hope that even as everything else changed, certain things remained the same. Asami took one last lingering look at the photo and returned it to the box. She crossed to the window and stared at the flowers. And blinked. There was something tucked into the frame on the outside of her window. Asami's room was a few floors up and no one had been in her room for longer than a few minutes and days. The servants could not have placed it there before either. Hard thudding, Asami pushed the window open and plucked the slightly damp note from its resting place. Her heart raced as she unfolded it. Asami. Sorry I haven't been in touch before. Everyone's so keen on keeping me out of sight and rested. I feel fine though. I hope you find this note, and I hope I get back okay without them noticing. I snuck out of Tenzin's house and used his glider. Didn't want to wake you, so I just left the note. I miss you. We'll meet up, soon. Things are just odd at the moment. I mean, I have a mom and dad now. It's taking some getting used to. I'm not exactly sure how to act around them just yet. Sorry, rambling. I'll see you soon though. Korra. Asami grinned, fears and doubts melting away. With a yelp of joy she flopped back onto her bed and read the note over again. See you soon, she murmured, rapidly becoming aware of just how hungry she was. Time to get cleaned up and face the world. Korra swooped in the night air, curling the air around herself and sending the glider high above the city. It was a spectacular sight from up here. The mass of bright lights and tall buildings in the center, the slow spread of lights like the stars above them into the outlying areas of Republic City. The air responded to her whim as she sailed in the dark stillness. Hopefully no one would see her. No one had seen her last night as she snuck out to take the notes to Asami, Mako and Bolin. And that should have been the end of it. She had gotten away with sneaking out at night. The thought made her smile. Stereotypical teenage behavior it seemed, based on some of Asami's radio dramas. She would never have imagined it would ever apply to her. But she needed to reach out. She needed to get out if only for a little while. It was odd to have parents suddenly. Now things had calmed, she felt a little lost. How should she behave around them? How independent could she be now? Too many questions, and the need to be free. The need to fly. It was only supposed to be one time to deliver the notes. But it was impossible to resist the impulse the next night. She could not give this up. Not now. Korra completed a turn in the air and alighted onto the top of Avatar Aang's statue. Aang, she said, staring back at the city. I still wish I could talk to you. Wish I could understand everything you wanted me to know. But I promise you, no matter whatever else happens in the world, I will keep your city safe for you. She took a deep breath. Thank you. For everything. I just hope I can do half as much good as you did. Korra took a deep breath, flicked the glider open and leapt into the air. Check the description for the links to the author.